Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm here with part 6 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as a Prodigy Uzumaki. The playlist is above, and with that being said, let the tale begin. Chapter 31. When I reopened my eyes, I was sprawled in front of the QB, who was locked in his cell. You owe me, little rat. I probably do. What the hell do you want? The Yonbi will remain asleep for several days. Get out and make sure I don't hear anything from you for the next few weeks at least. I would be very happy with that arrangement. With the feeling of having been just punched in the head, I woke in the middle of the street with a groan. For the record, this is why I hate fighting. Someone always gets hurt, and that someone is always me. I glared up as the Tsuchikage, who stood over me with his arms crossed while I tried to ease my headache with a little bit of medical ninjutsu. Stupid chakra-induced headaches that can't be fixed by chakra, I muttered to myself. There's no such thing as a wind prison, the Tsuchikage snapped. The last person to say that to me was a traitor. For your information, I am an Uzumaki. As a rule, we suck at Jinjutsu, which means my wind prison exists. That was bad logic, but at the moment, I didn't care. That doesn't even make sense, and Konoha doesn't have access to advanced wind jutsus. I shrugged and climbed to my feet, staggering slightly. Someone ducked under my arm and gripped my haori tightly, tapping out a discreet message of identity. A quick glance revealed Itsuki. He wasn't supposed to have run up to me, but it was nice to have a comrade, despite the fact that I was probably supposed to be protecting him, not the other way around. Even so, I let him take on a good portion of my weight so I didn't sway as my head throbbed. It wasn't fair that I put most of my weight on him, but he was a shinobi, albeit a genin. He could handle my weight without a problem. He could probably handle an adult's weight without flinching, but I had to find a balance. Itsuki was the Hokage's son. I had no doubt he had been trained on how to handle himself as a political prisoner. At the same time, I barely knew the kid, was not trained to handle being a prisoner, and was unfortunate enough to have a higher rank than the kid. He would defer to me, even if I royally screwed up. I needed to get him out of IWA. At the very least, I had to get him separated from me. Kairo and I-san, Itsuki broke off. The nickname, I hated that nickname, but every kid at the hospital called me Kairo-sensei, and the Ni-san was new. When he made no attempt to finish the statement, I realized that it was just a ploy at familiarity, an attempt to avoid separation again. I had read his file, he was one of the genin under my command, but the details were sparse. The Hokage had no need for a complete profile of his son, and no one else had reason to need the information. Without betraying my thoughts, I ruffled his hair and shifted so that I was mostly between him and the Tsuchikage. I needed his attention on me. I had to be the valuable one, the threat. If I were you, I would play very nicely with your Jinchuriki. You can only beat a dog so many times before it bites back. Now, if you had something to speak with me about, Tsuchikage-san, it better happen soon. Gritting his teeth, the Tsuchikage glared at me and jerked his head for me to follow. In short order, we made it to what I assumed to be his office, which looked surprisingly similar to the Hokage's. He took a seat behind his desk and I slumped in one of the chairs in front of it, uninvited. Itsuki had much better manners, waiting until the Tsuchikage gave permission, then sitting with the proper posture on the rather large chair with me. After a few seconds, someone entered. A quick glance confirmed it was the daimyo, but he remained behind us, taking a seat on the short sofa beside the door. An intimidation tactic. It would have worked with a civilian, but intimidation was never as effective when I had an ally watching my back. Also, my opinion of civilian nobility went down the drain the moment the fire daimyo opened his mouth. You are a medic, the Tsuchikage snapped when everyone was as comfortable as they could get. Yup, but I'm not as good as you seem to think. I just like to experiment, and most of the time it works. Most of the time? Yeah, there was this one time that I tried to heal a giant cut someone already stitched up, but I didn't take the stitches out first. It wasn't pretty. The Tsuchikage just studied me intently. My attempt to distract him with information died pathetically. Why aren't you a ninjutsu fighter? I rolled my eyes. Stubbornness it was. I didn't want to. Why not? Tell me, what's the point of fighting if it only brings death? I see. No, you don't. Next question. He studied me for a long time. What do you think of IWAs so far? Depends. Do you want my honest, blunt answer or my nice one? The honest one, please. I rolled my eyes. Your shinobi are needlessly cruel, and it has mostly resulted in heightened paranoia among the non-shinobi and shinobi who do not participate in mainstream specializations. At least that's my take on it. In comparison, from the minimal information I've gathered, Konoha reveres diversity. By my standards, almost everyone I've met is a pig-headed bigot, but to each his own. And the nice one? I'm an Uzumaki and my clan is still an ally of Konoha, therefore, this entire village is my enemy and I ought to hold no goodwill for anyone or anything here. The Tsuchikage leaned forward and folded his hands to create a rest for his chin while he contemplated his response to my assessment. And who would you not consider a pig-headed bigot, as you so bluntly put it? I haven't met them yet. You said you ought to hold no goodwill. Does that mean you have a differing opinion? That completely depends on you. After the events of today, any potential acknowledgement I have for this nation has plummeted. Next question. You are a very difficult child. I try very hard. I scowled at him and crossed my arms, sliding further down in my chair. Why do you like healing? I hate it. Cue the exasperation. Why do you do it? Because I hate fighting more. You are a pacifist? To my surprise, I realized I couldn't agree with that statement. I didn't know why I was telling the truth. I could have just made up the randomest and most obviously defiant statements I could, but the truth wasn't hurting anything. I'll get back to you on that. If someone pushed the right buttons, I probably would declare war on them and dedicate a good portion of my existence to their destruction. While I was thumbing through the rapidly lengthening list of things I would fight for and unilaterally destroy, I belatedly realized that Tsuchikage was speaking again. Uzumaki. Are you paying attention? To you? Nope, but I am now. What do you want? If I were to ask you to assist at my hospital, what would you do? He repeated with forced patience. It depends on what you give me in return. What do you want? He gritted out. I don't think that's how the bargaining process works. I smirked. I had a feeling this was going to backfire horribly on me. I have something you want and no motivation to share. Keep in mind that I am more easily motivated not to share it. There was a long pause. I stood up. If that is all. You are just being difficult. Yes, I am, and thank you for noticing my hard work. Daimyo-sama, do you have anything to add? Nothing that will benefit anyone here. If I may? Out of the corner of my eye, I barely caught the daimyo reaching for Itsuki. With a bit of strategic chakra use, I managed to slide between them before the daimyo grabbed the boy's arm. His fingers brushed the front of my vest before he jerked backwards. Get out of the way, boy, the daimyo snapped impatiently. Why? That brat is mine. Actually, as Itsuki-kun's fellow countryman and ranked superior officer, he answers to me. I was promised. I don't care. The treaty says that Itsuki-kun will reside in Iwagakure for the next year and return to Kanagakure unharmed. As his commander, as of now he has orders to remain with me, not be paraded around like a prize animal. You can't stop me from taking him. In the end, probably not. Then get out of my way. No. I am losing my patience with you, child. And you are not comprehending the situation. If you attempt to touch Itsuki-kun without his explicit consent, I am well within my rights to execute you on the spot. Before you ask, yes, I am fully aware that I am deliberately threatening your life. You would never succeed. I probably wouldn't, but to stop me, the Tsuchikage over there would have to kill me, which would invalidate the treaty, and to slow your own inevitable destruction you would have to give up any rights you think you have to Itsuki-kun. One hand hovered defensively in front of me while the other tightened around a fistful of Itsuki's shirt. Tell me, is humiliating a child who can't do anything about who his father is in front of your little noble friends that important to you? The daimyo raised his hand to hit me, and at the last possible second I used Kawarimi to replace myself with Itsuki. Before anyone could properly process what happened, I pulled Itsuki out of range to retaliate. The daimyo's rings had cut deeply into his cheek, but it was a small price to pay. Oh, I said, grinning like the cat that got the canary. A deliberate and successful attack on Tsuchikage's person is grounds for his immediate return to Konohagakure or the dissolution of the treaty. Which will it be, Tsuchikage-san? Are you confident that you can weather a vengeful and motivated army attacking your borders for an assault against our Hokage less than a month after an agreement has been made? Or are you sure your military will survive the lack of income when the civilian sect sees how bad you are at following through on contracts? You little bastard. The Tsuchikage snarled, appearing directly in front of me. Whoever strikes first wins, Anoki. You're still here, he sneered back. I didn't respond. After a long moment, he withdrew and motioned towards the wall where two masked agents materialized. Take the younger boy to the Konoha border and dump him there, let his own take care of him. The second the door closed behind Itsuki, the Tsuchikage grabbed the front of my vest and slammed me against the wall. I will not be made a fool of, boy. And I will not be played as one. I'm glad we understand each other. The next thing I knew, he shoved me out into the hall in front of 3 jonin. Take him back to the place set up for him and lock him there. He is not to see or speak with anyone until I say so. I blinked once and instead of the jonin in front of me, I was stumbling into the apartment with the door slamming behind me. As soon as I landed on my knees, I summoned Cannon. What do you need, Kichiro? I need you to hurry and tell the Hokage that his son should be delivered to the Konoha border and to make sure the kid makes it home safely. If they don't recover him within the month, the Tsuchikage and Iwa's daimyo have broken the treaty and they need to make sure everyone knows that IWA is unfaithful to their contracts and they are justified in resuming the war as soon as they are able. What the hell happened? Frankly, the kid's life is more important and I'm not sure he's going to be in very good shape when he reaches the border, so someone needs to be there to meet them. Fine. Cannon disappeared in a puff of smoke and I pulled myself to my feet, activated the security seal as I entered the bedroom, dumped everything on the floor and collapsed on the bed. And now to wait, I muttered into the air. Hours later of making patterns in the ceiling with Senbon, I had accomplished nothing but boredom. I could toss kunai and Senbon with my feet, but I generally relied on close proximity for them to land. I stopped and collected all the Senbon. After they were all in a neat little pyramid, I resumed making Senbon patterns and trying to pull them back to me with rather badly made strings of chakra. I obviously didn't use my fighting Senbon, which were made of glass, covered in poison, and built to shatter dangerously in case I hit anything but flesh. I used identical metal ones to train, spar, and mess around with. Needless to say, I had a lot of Senbon and it was a testament to my boredom for the next several hours when I ran out. The majority of the walls and ceiling were covered with spirals and shapes of 5-inch Senbon when I stood up to start gathering them and putting them away. 3 hours later I stood up to look for food in the kitchen, but it was freakishly empty. I took a quick shower and when I finished, I could smell what could only be takeout in the kitchen. I scowled out a thank you to the air at the confirmation I was being watched, but ate the food anyways, after thoroughly checking it for poisons. At least no one could actually sneak up on me while I was sleeping without tripping the seals. At least, I hope they couldn't. I did fall asleep unnaturally fast after the meal. Chapter 32. I followed a dull, boring routine for what I guessed to be the next 5 months. Every morning, I woke up and set up a privacy seal around the dojo to train with taijutsu katas until my stomach began to growl. I took down the seals and went into the kitchen to find the same simple, bland meal, just barely nutritious enough for a kid my physical age. Rice, a small bowl of miso soup, and raw vegetables or fruits. Afterwards, I washed the dishes and set up a privacy seal to work on sealing, with supplies from the bag Danzo had given me. It had enough resources inside that would probably last me a decade, if not more. I could spend several years going through the bag and still find useful pieces hidden away. It was a masterful work of sealing, tied directly to the ANBU tattoo on my back. The seals were stained into the bag and the items in it. I cursed up a storm when I accidentally activated one of the seals on a Senbon and the kunai that exploded out of it impaled both my feet in several places. I was damn lucky, because the floor and wall in front of me had nearly 100 kunais stuck deep in the wood. The hidden items were mostly weapons, sealing supplies, and clothes, but there were materials that could help me escape from just about anywhere. On little slips of paper, there were disjointed instructions from Danzo that I would periodically stumble across. They were coded in ANBU code, which I only knew the basics of, but quickly learned well enough to read the messages. Some were just reassuring, promising that Konoha hadn't given up on me, that I would be welcomed back when it was over. Others were pieces of strategies to distract and confuse interrogators. A few were infiltration tips and strategies. The messages on caring for injuries were the most entertaining of the bunch. All of them were written on sweet-tasting paper that dissolved when I put it on my tongue. The ink tasted bitter, but consuming the paper was more reliable than trying to burn it. Around lunchtime, I moved back to the dojo to work on chakra control and practicing the basics of elemental ninjutsu until dinner while mentally reciting everything I knew about medical ninjutsu, human anatomy, sealing, and any other topic that came to mind. I wasn't given lunch. At dinner time, I returned to the kitchen where a meal of fish, rice, vegetables, and a glass of milk waited. As soon as I finished dinner, I funneled as much chakra as I could into a seal I specifically designed for taking in chakra and doing absolutely nothing with it. It considerably expanded my reserves, and after the first 3 months, I nearly blew myself up before I realized that the seal couldn't handle the amount of chakra I was pumping into it. I had to make a new seal and destroy the old one, but I counted it as a success. I guessed I was around the level of a Tokubetsu Jonin in reserves. I either meditated until I fell asleep, or passed out in exhaustion and restarted the cycle the next day. Once a week, I spent as long as I could running around the walls of the dojo to keep up my endurance, not even breaking for meals, and running until I collapsed from exhaustion. At first, it lasted the entire day, and by the 4th month, it lasted 2, even after I created seals that weighed me down. Every month, I spent a day working on my balance with my slackline and some ninja wire spread across the dojo. I would have preferred the entire time spent on intellectual pursuits, but the mysteriously appearing and disappearing books were things I'd already read. I gained a newfound respect for monks and hermits, because the only individual I had any interaction with was the Kyuubi. I noticed pale white scars appearing across my skin without corroborating injuries, but for some inexplicable reason, never pursued the matter. "It's nice to see another human being," I said when an IWA Jonin finally opened my front door without invitation as I headed to practice my katas one morning at the beginning of the 6th month. "That Tsuchikage wishes to see you. Get dressed." "Wonderful, give me a few minutes." I deliberately took an exceedingly long time to get ready, even though the Jonin watched me carefully the entire time. Sometime in the middle of my imprisonment, the uniform had worn out and I discovered a second, slightly larger and better-fitting uniform in a storage seal Danzo had stuffed in my back. There were also enough to last me for several years, which was good foresight on his part, that enabled me to passively resist any manipulation IWA attempted. Despite the fiasco with Root that I remembered happening, he made a damn good commander, I was certain of that much. While I changed out of the ragged clothes I wore to sleep in, the Jonin tapped his foot impatiently. "Ah, hold your horses, I just woke up." I rolled my eyes at him and tied my Hatake over the bandages around my head. "Excuse me?" "It's an expression. Now, I'm ready to go." He scowled at me, but led me out anyways, through the streets and up to the Tsuchikage's office. "Welcome, Kichiro-kun," the Tsuchikage greeted. I smiled amicably at him and took up his gestured offer for a seat as the Jonin left. "I trust you are satisfied with your accommodations?" "For the most part," I answered. "They're a bit lonely, and I would much prefer to make my own food, but otherwise they are acceptable. I will see what I can do to make it more pleasant. Now, did my Jonin inform you of what I wish to discuss with you?" He did not. "You are a talented and intelligent medic nin and shinobi. I have received reports that you have worked to keep up your skill in the past months." He paused for my reaction, but I kept my face neutral. It was more difficult than I expected after slightly more than 5 months of nearly total isolation, but I succeeded. "I wish to propose a mutually beneficial arrangement. Would you like to hear it?" "Sure." I relaxed into my chair to listen. "You have medical expertise that rivals the best Konoha medics, especially on the topic of poisons. Someone scared their allies in AIM will turn on them." I sniped to the Kyuubi rather than saying it out loud and breaking the amicability between the Tsuchikage and myself. "In return for teaching my medics how to combat poisons like you did against Suna, I am willing to grant you training in any 2 elements of your choice and regular, taijutsu only spars with opponents of your caliber. I had no chance at hiding my surprise at his offer, and I spent a long time thinking about it. I couldn't imagine any way it could be significantly detrimental. Only an extremely small percentage of Konoha shinobi utilized poisons on a regular basis, and even fewer made it vital to their fighting style. The only people it would have a significant impact on was Aim, Suna, and Kiri, who all regularly utilized poisons in the war. He must have seen the skill as equally valuable to training in 2 elements. The spars just helped everyone equally. I was a strict adherent to the proverb, never look a gift horse in the mouth, but in this case, I had to question it. Why? This offer is clearly and significantly skewed in my favor. He might have assumed I wouldn't be able to learn much about elemental jutsus, simply because it took so long to master, but even so, elemental ninjutsu was extremely coveted information, so much so that most adherents tended to make up their own jutsus after mastering the basics, mostly because of the lack of willing teachers. I believe I will keep that information to myself. I half expected that. Would you like time to think on my offer? Yes, please. He nodded, smirking, and another jonin entered the room. I will meet with you this afternoon. Until then, my jonin will accompany you and show you the village. I nodded once, bowed politely, and left the room, the jonin beside me. That jonin is the Jinchuriki of the Gobi, the QB volunteered unexpectedly. I didn't respond, but appreciated the notice. As soon as we stepped out into the street, I headed directly towards the nearest unhealthy food stand, starved for something other than the bland, barely filling meals I had been receiving twice a day. While I waited for my food just outside the stand, I summoned Kanon. I need you to contact the Hokage for me, I murmured quietly. Kanon scowled, but nodded without a word. I quickly told her that Tsuchikage's offer. Ask the Hokage what I should do. Kanon trilled once before vanishing in a puff of smoke so I could pay for my meal. Unlike Konoha, trees weren't entirely common in IWA, and it took me a while to find a decent one to climb and eat in. Awkwardly, the jonin followed. I unpacked the meal and held half of it to the jonin. So that Tsuchikage thinks only another Jinchuriki stands a chance against me if I go crazy. Interesting, I commented. The jonin stiffened. I'm Kichiro, what's your name? Michi, he grunted, accepting the food and opening it. How did you know? I opened my food. Know what? I'm a Jinchuriki and this is my favorite food. The QB told me about the gobi, and I didn't know it was your favorite, just a coincidence, I guess. Coincidences don't exist. I let him think whatever he wanted. I really did pick the closest stand and ordered the first 2 things off the menu. I took a few bites while I studied him. He wore the standard IWA uniform without the red shirt beneath his vest, revealing burn scars up his arms. Dark brown hair obscured his face, only showing one light brown eye. Red shinobi pants covered his legs and were tied at his ankles with black cloth to prevent them from getting in the way. He wore no shoes, which was strange, but I didn't comment. He wore no visible weapons, which was slightly unnerving, but considering he was a Jonin Jinchuriki, it probably didn't matter. I think coincidences exist, unless you want to blame the situation on my non-existent Jinchuriki senses that I unconsciously acted on. The Jonin shrugged and polished off the rest of the food I handed him. I took my time eating, leaning against the trunk of the tree. A quartet of children ran past laughing, but I ignored them in favor of watching the last few minutes of the sunrise. I saw you all those months ago controlling and subduing the Yonbi. So? Why didn't you let the Biju rampage? This village certainly deserves it, and you must hate IWA for the things that happened during the war. I shrugged. I could say it was an intimidation tactic, but I'd be lying. You probably already know this, but utilizing the Biju's power, without an Uzumaki seal designed to protect the Jinchuriki, is painful and physically damaging, no matter how fast a Jinchuriki heals. I have one of the best seals ever made and it hurts me to use the Kyuubi's chakra, even though it heals me at the same time. Michi frowned. Rashi-san is from IWA and you are from Konoha. The 2 villages have been at odds since their foundation. And Jinchuriki have been at odds with everyone for just as long. Can you honestly say that the place you live, which has done nothing but make sure you're alive to receive their condemnation, is more important than your very identity? You have a strange perspective. So I've been told. Rashi-san is the Yanbi Jinchuriki, correct? Correct. Is he okay? As far as I know, he is isolated outside the village, similarly to how you were, but he has received more visitors. It wasn't his fault, the transformation, I mean. The seal is faulty. So you've mentioned. How is it flawed? I wouldn't know, I haven't even seen it. Could you fix it, if given the opportunity? It depends. I could almost certainly identify the problem, but I don't know how to alter existing seals. That was a lie. I was capable of altering seals, though my results were inconsistent and IWA probably didn't have any of the necessary supplies on hand. I didn't have the right ink and I didn't know how to make it. He hummed, his visible eye never leaving me as I polished off the last of the food. Why do you want to know? I wasn't a vain person, not the slightest, but his hair looked fluffy and was the exact same color as my hair in my previous life. I was envious. I didn't care for my lank red hair, but looking at his hair in comparison made me hate my own. Redheads were cool, always. I even dyed my hair red on a dare once, but only other redheads were cool. Tell me, why are Uzumaki seals consistently so much better? You answer my question first. I want to know because I've been ordered to try gathering intel on your Fuinjutsu abilities. Why are Uzumaki seals consistently superior to seals from every other village? It was a bold answer. Frankly, I didn't know the answer to that. I had seen very few seals from other villages, and Konoha had such a heavy Uzumaki influence that I wasn't sure of why it was inferior. After a bit of thought, I decided to give him the bullshit answer the Hokage gave Kumo. At the very least, it would solidify the story and only the Uzumaki and Hokage would know better. Most of it is because Uzumaki chakra is perfectly suited for sealing and Uzumakis have dedicated everything towards perfecting the art to be used with their chakra, going so far as to share enough of their style so that most of what others know of Fuinjutsu refuses to work properly with non-Uzumaki chakra. I could smell the bullshit in that statement, but Michi bought it. Basically, the Uzumakis have been conning the rest of the shinobi nations for generations, possibly several centuries. We shared a laugh and I bundled up the takeout boxes to drop in the trash can near the road. He showed me around the village, making small talk, both of us ignoring the dirty looks from civilian and shinobi alike, though the higher their rank, the less antagonistic they became. I could feel people watching me even though no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find them and I was unwilling to draw on the Kyuubi's chakra. Hours later, Michi and I stopped at one of the training grounds, secluded from the rest of the village. Ever want to see how you match up against another trained Jinchuriki? I hope that will never be necessary. Besides, you have at least a decade of experience on me. He nudged my shoulder. Come on, I want to see what you got. You're forgetting two things. First, I'm a Chunin medic, and second, we are still inside the village walls. You have the Kyuubi at your command, and the special forces won't let it get out of hand. No, thank you. Come on, brat. You'd be fighting the Kyuubi, not me, and I know that's not a fair matchup. Besides, the Kyuubi is feeling lazy today and doesn't want to. I am actually in favor of this matchup. No, you're not. Shut up. Yes, I am, but I can see why this might be a problem. Exactly. You're bluffing. Think what you want. He shrugged but didn't press the point. It wasn't that I was unwilling to spar, I just didn't want to fight him. Want a race? I asked instead. Okay. Rules? Kawarimi only. I pulled out 36 practice Senbon and threw them in 2 lines across the clearing, varying distances apart. The last 4 Senbon landed in a boulder opposite us. The object is to grab one of the Senbon in the boulder and bring it back behind the line. I tossed one of my sticks on the ground to mark the starting point. Are you sure about this? He asked warily. Yeah, my sensei used to time me to see how fast I could make a circle on the training grounds before I graduated. Normally, Kawarimi races is pre-Jinin training. I rolled my eyes. The larger the ratio between body mass and the object you're switching with, the more chakra control it takes. Replacing with Senbon takes a hell of a lot of concentration and a generous scoop of skill. He shrugged. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, go! In a blur, we sped through the course. I won, landing with a whoop and turning to see Michi on his hands and knees, halfway back, gasping for air. I swapped with the Senbon nearest him. You alright? I asked warily, kneeling beside him. One of the people watching revealed themselves, hovering at the edge of the clearing. You find this fun? He asked incredulously, recovering quickly. Yeah, I have really good chakra control, so it's a challenge. Most exercises aren't. He pressed the Senbon he retrieved into my hand. Your training is insane. Not really, I protested with a shrug. Challenges are fun. Back up, did you say that most chakra control exercises don't even challenge you? Yeah, thanks to medic training and a manipulative sensei. He stared at me incredulously as I impertinently poked him in the cheek, grinning. I beat you. You are a child. Yup. I barely saw him move as he pushed me and sent me sprawling backwards. Cheekily, I stuck my tongue out at him, enjoying the immaturity, and the person at the edge of the clearing vanished. Hold up! I exclaimed and pulled off my medic pouch, fishing through it for the right storage seals. I handed one to him and took the other, unsealing a water balloon and tossing it in his face, cackling manically. He unsealed his own, but I had already showered the clearing with Senbon and replaced myself. He soaked a Senbon instead of me. I threw another from my new position, but he was a Jonin, and easily ducked, launching another at me in return. I waited until the last second before making several replacements at once, tossing 3 balloons from 3 different angles. He avoided them all and retaliated so fast the balloon burst in his hand from the power of the throw. I doubled over laughing, but before I could finish the first guffaw, he forced me to dodge another. Kichiro, 2. Michi, 0. I sang out, in between each use of the kawarimi. You're going down, little kid. He appeared behind me with a shunshin and I barely escaped him cracking a water balloon over my head, only to have him appear behind me a second time and succeed. After that surprise, he landed several more hits and I landed none, until I got fed up and doused the entire clearing with an overpowered water jutsu from the sky, only to be pelted with 3 more balloons in the process. Before he could escape the falling water, I turned the entire training ground into slick mud, sucking the 2 of us up to our knees. We both got soaked, but both of us were laughing and sinking further into the mud. I never expected your idiocy to work, but congratulations, brat, you just gained an unconditional friend through the most immature and unorthodox method I know of. The Tsuchikage wants him to gain my trust, for the 2 of us to be friends, so he has to go along with pretty much anything I want to do. A harmless water fight is something anyone can genuinely enjoy, even if it's ninja style. Everyone needs time to just goof off. Jinchuriki, especially in IWA, are rarely just happy. Besides, I haven't done anything stupid in months and I'm overdue. And the only reason he's the most powerful is because he's the oldest. I was just making a comment, I didn't ask for your philosophical reasoning. I rolled my eyes. On the souls of my predecessors, may they rest in peace, what the hell happened here? I heard the Tsuchikage's voice snarl at the edge of the clearing. I scrambled out of the mud and opened my mouth to explain, but Michi grabbed my arm and pulled me behind him. I apologize, Tsuchikage-sama, he said, staring down the Kage. I just got carried away showing off to our village guest. I opened my mouth to protest and say I could clean it all up in a few minutes, but the Kyuubi cut me off. Stay silent, you are in a very dangerous position right now. What do you mean, dangerous? It was just a water fight, just innocent fun. The idiot in front of you just took a fall for you that no one had to take. The Tsuchikage knows exactly what happened, he's been watching the entire time. His appearance, question, tone, even the killing intent he's letting off was all staged to judge your reaction, to see if you would defend your supposed new friend and take the heat for him. How the hell did you come to that conclusion? Why can't I just fix the situation? If you say a word, your Jinchuriki friend will be put down like an animal. He just declared his loyalty to you. If it wouldn't get him executed on the spot, damn the consequences, he would probably defect to Konoha. You're overreacting. A lifetime of mental conditioning can't be thrown away that easily. The mental conditioning in Konoha is much different from IWA. Act like you have no idea what's going on, act scared, act confused, but do not say anything. I ignored the QB and opened my mouth to speak, but Michi's hand tightened around my arm in warning. What the hell is going on, Kurama? The QB locked my muscles as Michi spun, a long, jagged blade appearing in his hand, and thrust it just underneath the left side of my ribs, up under my ribcage, and out through the back of my right shoulder. Michi cackled over my scream as he jerked the blade out. Chapter 33. If I hadn't been a Jinchuriki, I would have died within a minute, even with medical attention. Had I not been a medic, the QB would have been forced to flood my body with potentially deadly amounts of chakra to keep me alive. Instead, he only shoved enough chakra through me to keep me conscious through the pain, and I focused on healing as much as I could as fast as possible. I focused on fixing the severed aorta first, then repairing the severed primary bronchi that fed into my right lung, then created a patchwork repair to the damaged organs. I started to repair the torn tissue in my lung when my legs, I didn't even realize I was still standing, collapsed. Someone caught me as I fell, and dashed off, hopefully to the hospital. The QB made sure I never stopped until I managed to heal myself to the point I wouldn't die. During that time, the only sensations I processed was movement and the presence of Biju chakra. The intense pain never eased, even when I finally lost consciousness. Every breath was painful, if unobstructed, and I felt like the sword was still tearing at my insides. It was worse than pneumonia. It was infinitely worse than any other injury I ever received. Internal organs were not supposed to be able to feel that much pain. After the first few cycles into somewhat consciousness, I realized that full consciousness wouldn't come for a long time without the help of another medic, which caused me to temporarily freak out when my barely audible croak for a medic was met with being laid down on burning hot sand and force-fed water. Someone was talking to me urgently, but I only repeated medic and help, hoping they got the idea that I needed a doctor at the very least. Later, I would find out that I had been speaking in English, which did me absolutely no good. I healed most of the internal damage, but the shattered shoulder blade, clavicle, and the top part of my humerus were a lost cause, as well as all the damaged ligaments and muscles. They would need surgery to fix. Chakra could only do so much. Somehow, it only made everything hurt more. I wasn't sure how long it took, but eventually, the near-constant movement and regular force feedings of water during my semi-conscious moments ceased, replaced with a hard bed and 3 pairs of hands seeming to almost constantly be touching me. The pain receded rapidly, so I couldn't complain. I was still force-fed bad-tasting liquids on a regular basis. Finally, I woke up, healed enough to interact with my surroundings. Michi leaned over me the second I opened my eyes. "Kichiro-kun? Are you awake this time? Do you remember me?" I moaned and pulled away slightly. "Why, you almost killed me," I managed, throat sore from disuse, or screaming. I wasn't exactly sure which. "Sorry about that. The good news is that you're going to be fine." "Where am I?" "That's part of the bad news." "IWA. Tetsu no Kuni. We're both ninja. How the hell are we not dead?" "Our hosts don't know that. They think we're civilians who met on the road on our way to find work in Kumo. I need to get back to Konoha." I struggled to sit up. "No," Michi snapped coldly, pressing a specific point on my chest. I slumped back with a whine of pain. "What happened? Short version or the long one?" "Short one first. I restarted the war between Konoha and IWA. IWA is suffering, considering everything I know about the village got sent to Konoha and every other village. We're staying in Tetsu no Kuni until it's over." "You bastard." I gasped and he pressed on my injured shoulder in retaliation, sending lines of fiery pain through my torso. I nearly blacked out before he let go. "Let go of the poor child," a woman's voice shrieked. "How many times do I have to tell you not to mess with him? I don't care who you are, you leave my patient alone. Get out." "Yes, Samurai-sama." Michi quickly left, leaving me alone with the woman. "Poor boy, I hope you're not bleeding again." "Don't worry, I'll keep the nasty man away from you until you can properly sock him in the jaw." "How are you feeling?" "What am I thinking? Of course you feel awful. Do you think you can sit up for me?" I didn't get much of a choice in the matter. Good, good, you'll be up and about in no time. Sit tight and I'll get you something to eat. She stood up and started to leave as I swung my legs over the edge of my bed. No, 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 you're not getting up just yet. You might feel a lot better than you did before, little Uzumaki, but you still should have died from that wound. You're lucky your friend here got you to a medic mean then to me. Stay in that bed. I lay back obediently, one leg hanging over the edge of the bed. She bustled out, but an unfamiliar man stopped her in the doorway with a few words. She nodded once and slipped out. He closed the door behind him and pulled a thick slat of wood across it, locking it. He stepped forward and held out a single chopstick. I took it. Confused, but the second I wrapped my fingers around it, he snatched it out of my hand and pointed a long blade at my neck. Ninja are not allowed in Tetsu no Kuni. What are you doing here? How? Civilians may still respect the Uzumaki name, but clan names mean nothing to me. What is your real name and rank? Kichiro. I'm Uzumaki Kichiro, Chunin medic of Konohagakure. I did not intend to come here and I will leave immediately. He took a step forward and pressed the tip of his sword into my sternum. You're still a ranked ninja in my house, most likely a highly skilled prodigy considering your age and the Konoha Anbu tattoo on your shoulder. From the seals on your forehead, palms, chest, and the soles of your feet, you're at the very least connected to someone on the very short list of Konoha seal masters. Why shouldn't I kill you? Look, you're overestimating me. Konoha sued for peace just over 5 months ago. The Hokage's son and I were supposed to be Iwa's prisoners in order to maintain the peace. As long as we were safe and unharmed, peace would last. The ANBU tattoo is to explain my absence in Konoha and stop IWA from attempting anything funny on me. I don't have a mask, uniform, or skills to back it up. I'm a Chunin, yes, but I'm a medic first and foremost, and the rank was mostly a reward for a few medical heroics while Konoha was fighting Suna and my sensei pushing me up the ranks to take foreign attention off my little sister. Konoha wants their Uzumaki allies back, but I don't have the talent or knowledge to resurrect the Uzumaki Fuinjutsu style. I won't hurt you, your family, or your friends unless they hurt me first, I swear it on everything I care about. Without taking his eyes off me, the man took 2 steps backwards and opened a trunk at the foot of the bed, pulling out my bakkan and tossing it on my lap. I made a point not to reach for it. I found this sealed in a scroll disguised as a letter from a sister of yours that your friends didn't throw away when they presumably tossed the rest of your gear. You're the student of the White Fan and training in Kinjutsu. I'm not even good enough to be given a full blade. You're still the White Fawn student. Every word I said is true, I swear. I mean no one harm, I don't even know how I got here or how long I've been out of commission and I'll leave as soon as you'll let me. Why should I trust a ninja? I don't know. I snapped, losing my cool. I don't care what you think or feel, I just want to go home. I'm sick of the fighting and the suspicion and the mind games, arg. I bit off the rest of what could only be considered a temper tantrum. How old are you? 9, wait, I'm 10 now, I turned 10 shortly after I made it to IWA. Give me your hand. He sheathed his sword and reached into his pocket. Why? I shrank even further away from him, clamping my hands to my chest. If you want to stay here, just do it. I don't want to stay here. I want to go home. Well, you can't, kid. The borders of Tetsu no Kuni closed 3 days ago, no one is allowed in or out. I have to try. That means I've been out of contact for 3 days and... You've been here for almost 2 weeks, kid. The only people with any reason to believe you're alive are in this house. I have to tell, I started to bring my hands together to summon cannon, but the man grabbed my wrist and ruined the jutsu. I screamed in pain as he twisted my injured arm outwards and clamped a manacle around it, chaining me to the iron bedpost. Let me go, please, I just want to go home. I clutched my throbbing shoulder and tried to use medical ninjutsu to ease the pain, but my chakra was inaccessible. Let me go! Please! I begged as he snatched the bakkan off my lap and marched towards the door. He slammed it so hard the door swung back open a crack. A traveler you found who had been attacked by ninjas, you said. The man snarled at the 2 IWA Jinchuriki. A Konoha patrol and their medic healed the worst of the damage, you said. Are the two of you blithering idiots to make up a story to bring a ninja into the house of two samurai? Are you trying to get yourselves killed? The scars on his hands and arms aren't from working in some blacksmith shop, they're from training with live blades, and I suspect some of them are from torture. The black symbols are fuinjutsu, not tattoos. He doesn't have calluses on his hands because he's trained with Senbon. Handing me a single chopstick to see how I took it made more sense now. He was looking at my grip to see whether I automatically grasped it like a potential weapon or just an object. The two of you are a pair of blithering idiots. I heard Michi stammering incoherently alongside a second, vaguely familiar voice I couldn't place. The boy inside that room could kill all of us with a single chopstick if pushed to it. You probably buried his gear somewhere, but did you keep his Hatake? Good, at least you have a few brain cells between you. Give it to me. Now. There was some rustling and I tried to see through the crack in the door, but the woman stood in front of it. Thank you. You're lucky he's a loyal nin or I would kill all three of you. Outside, my fields need to be tilled. Both of you, get on it. There was a quick shuffle of feet and they left in a hurry. Ryuta, you of all people know how dangerous Konoha nin can be. I don't kill children. He's a shinobi. I know. Then why? If we nurse him back to health he'll only turn on us. He won't, that I know for certain. You spoke with him for 2 minutes. How can you know? I just do. Leave it, we're close enough to Hino Kuni that the boy can get away free as soon as he's healed. Just take care of him. His name sounds familiar, I'm going to find out why. Put the other two to work however you can. It will hopefully keep the two idiots out of trouble. Are you sure they're not shinobi as well? I'm almost certain they are, but they're not from Konoha or they would have hopped across the border and rejoined their comrades. Then why are you letting them stay? They're running from something big enough that they would give up their weapons, throw away their pride, dull their reflexes, and suppress their chakra to dangerously low levels in order to pass as civilians here of all places, the only place shinobi can't reach. I don't know how the boy plays into this, but I'm going to go figure it out. I'll be back before dark. You can give my plate to the boy if he's still awake. Did I miss anything? Please don't get hurt, Ryuta-kun. I won't. I heard a door close and the sounds of cooking followed. I lay back down on the bed and turned my face into my pillow, quickly falling back asleep to escape the building pain from the injuries. Straight face. Waking back up was incredibly painful. My entire body ached and a slight fever common in major injuries had risen. Wake up, boy, someone snapped above me. I turned my head away from the voice and tried to settle back, ignoring the pain, but it was no use. I blinked open my eyes to see the samurai standing over me. I automatically sat up and scrambled backwards, pressing my back against the wall. Are you awake or just doing that ninja sleep fighting? When I didn't respond, he continued. I went into town yesterday to figure out why your name sounded so familiar. Just let me go and you never have to see me again. You're quite the international character. I don't care. A perfect Jinchuriki, enough fuinjutsu skill to seal a biju, the skill to negotiate a temporary peace between IWA and Konoha, and the willingness to give yourself up for it. Good, you know what I can do. Let me go. You won't make it a kilometer out that door. I'll be fine. Does your power to raise the dead include yourself? I don't raise the dead. Does that imply you can? What do you want? I want to know why you're a medic when you could be 10 times as powerful as you are now. And then you'll let me go? It'll be a start. No deal. He returned to the trunk and picked a plate off it, then held it out to me. I didn't take it. Heat. And you'll let me go? No, but if you don't, I'll force feed you. I turned my head away from him as he held the food under my nose. It smelled good, considering how hungry I was. He wasn't going to kill me unless I attacked him first, which I wasn't going to do unless he proved himself an enemy. From what I could tell, he wanted to help. All I had to do was make it no longer worth the effort. I took a deep breath and steeled myself before slamming my head back towards the metal bedpost as hard as I could in an attempt to knock myself out. His reflexes were much faster than I anticipated and caught my head before it could connect. He raised his eyebrow at me as I glared back. I was the prison master for the samurai army before I retired. Kid, you'll need a few more decades of experience to pull one over on me. I kept my jaw tightly closed as I jerked away from his touch. Tell me, why aren't you cooperating? I'm not going to hurt you or anyone else here, I just want to leave, yet you've chained me up simply because I wield chakra instead of a blade. You threatened me without provocation, so I see no reason to cooperate and give myself false hope that you'll be reasonable. He blinked in shock. I scowled and stared at the bed covers in annoyance. I apologize for giving you the wrong impression. If you know who I am and what I've done, you'll know that it's important for me to get back to Konoha. I am a Jinchuriki, so when Konoha figures out I'm still alive and being held here, a team, most likely consisting of my sensei and several ANBU, will arrive, and by then the situation will be beyond anyone's control. Let me go and no one will ever know I was here. That sounds like a threat to me. It's not a threat, it's a fact, but if it takes a threat to make you let me go, I'm perfectly willing to oblige. And what might that threat be? I'm a Jinchuriki, and the little chakra suppressor you've stuck on me can't contain several tails of Biju chakra at once. You'll have 3 shinobi nations bearing down on this house the instant the Kyuubi's chakra is sensed, and I'll be free to run home. IWA recently lost one of their Jinchuriki, so they'll be especially aggressive trying to locate a replacement. For the briefest of moments, alarm flashed across his face, then he leaned forward, both hands on the mattress, his face a foot away from mine. That's an impressive claim. Tell me, are you willing to follow through on it? My breathing quickened and I unconsciously tried to pull back and escape his intensity. I wouldn't make the threat if I wasn't willing to follow through. I stated as evenly as I could, but he was right. It would take a lot to make me follow through with that. I've met toddlers who can lie better than you. Let me go. And if I agree, what will you do first? Don't lie to me, I'm already low on patience. Contact my village and tell them I'm alive but injured. And after that? Do whatever the Hokage wants me to do, most likely set off for home. And how will you deal with your injuries, lack of gear, and the incomplete information you have? I don't know, I'll figure it out. Do you have any idea how ridiculous you sound? He stood up straight. I don't care. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Eat that plate of food and I'll write a message to be delivered to your Hokage that confirms you are alive, your location, and condition. What is your ninja registration number and verification code? I glared. That's the best deal you will get. Any connection you want with anyone or anything outside this room will go through me or my wife. I don't have any codes, but I can seal it so only a blood relative can open it. That is verification enough. He nodded, moved the plate within reach of my good arm, then left. Straight face. The next person I saw was the woman from before. It was pitch black except for a lamp on a small table beside me. I started to push her away with my good arm, but she pinned it to my chest. Easy, little one, I'm just changing the dressings. There's the beginnings of an infection and I don't want it to get any worse. My shoulder, how did you fix it? I asked, forcing myself to relax. It's most certainly not fixed, young man. Luckily, the blade missed your ribs and only took a chunk out of the edge of your scapula. Oh, I thought it was worse. She flicked my forehead. Ow! What was that for? Every major organ in your body except for your brain, heart, and spinal cord was damaged. Just a flesh wound. I chirped. I've had comrades die from less. I can fix the worst of it, I murmured as she pulled off the dressings. In order to do that, I would have to release the chain to give you access to your chakra. I know better than to think you'll let me replace it without a struggle. You'll be fine, if laid up for a lot longer than you would like. I grinned crookedly up at her, and when she turned to place the soiled bandage beside the lamp, I swung my foot at her throat, letting out a whimper of pain as the attack placed all my weight on my injured shoulder. I figured a muscle or forehead detached from the bone. It was the only explanation I could think of for the amount of pain it caused. The rest of the wound didn't hurt nearly as much since the only damage left was in the connecting tissue and the muscles in my abdomen. She caught the attack for her throat, but missed my other foot and my toes connected with her solar plexus, knocking her back several steps. The leather armor she wore muted the blow. I grabbed the oil lamp and threw it at her feet, forcing her to take several steps toward the door, and collided with the man as he rushed in. Luckily, the oil didn't catch fire. I grabbed the hand trapped in the manacle and dislocated my thumb. My wrist was far too small for the manacle, so another chain had been tangled around it inside of the manacle. It took me every second the man stopped to make sure his wife was all right to free my arm. The second my hand was free and I could draw on my chakra, I ducked under the man's first attack, feinted towards the window I would just barely have fit through, and then dashed towards the door. I was 2 steps away when the woman stepped in my path. I bent backwards to avoid her blade and planted my good arm on the ground in a backbend, cursing in pain as it pulled at the healed portion of the wound. I kicked upwards and struck the nerves of her wrist with my knee, forcing her to drop her blade. With a pain whine, I twisted onto my bad arm to catch the blade with the sole of my foot and generous amounts of chakra, and hitting the ground hard on my stomach to avoid a kick. I rolled onto my back and made eye contact with the man towering over me. If I let the blade follow its current trajectory, I could have driven it through the joint where his femur attached to his pelvis, probably shattering the head of the femur to the point where he would never walk again. I didn't want to hurt him, he was trying to help, even though it only did more harm than good. I redirected the blade down with a scream of pain, swinging it in a circle a few inches off the ground, forcing the couple to jump in the air to avoid losing their feet, like a morbid game of jump rope. The sword scared deeper into the room as I let go of it, and I gouged a divot the size of my foot into the cobblestone floor as I took off, shooting past the woman and out of the room like an arrow from a bowstring. I barely managed to open the window before I crashed through it and tumbled out into the snow, dressed only in a pair of civilian shorts, cursing the early winter. I glimpsed the man behind me in the windowsill as I took off, my gait crooked as I clamped both hands over the hole in my abdomen to slow the blood, leaving a very obvious trail. A civilian could follow it without much problem. When I glanced over my shoulder with blurry eyes, he was much faster than I anticipated. I couldn't shun Shin, not when I hadn't practiced in months and couldn't do it properly to begin with. I let him race after me, I had nothing to throw to slow him down, and waited until he was barely within arm's reach and about to grab me before I dropped into the snow, grabbed his foot, and tried to launch him into the air. He twisted his foot to avoid my hands and sprawled on top of me. I beat at his side with my elbow, but the leather armor absorbed the entirety of the blow. I could channel chakra into my punches, but it enhanced the already existing bones and muscles, which made me stronger and tougher. It couldn't level mountains unless I bulked up to giant size. I didn't know what prompted them to wear the non-traditional armor, but it was causing me some serious problems. The strike to the woman should have had her doubling over for at least a minute, and I should have broken the man's ribs before he pinned me down. Kai! I heard someone shout, their voice distant, and foreign chakra jolted through me. Lights appeared, shining down brightly. I wasn't outside, or in the samurai's house. My arms were pinned down to a stone floor by Michi, who had a knee on my chest and a hand underneath my head, while someone else pinned my hips and legs. I felt infinitely worse than before as they let go so I could roll over and dry heave. How the hell did he get put under a jinjutsu? We've been watching him this entire time. He still has the Kyuubi's chakra running through him, it shouldn't be possible. I don't know, but if someone can get past us, it means we need help, I heard Michi murmur. Konoha will kill us and he can't walk himself out in front of a border patrol. We have to try. What about one of the smaller countries? The second voice sounded familiar, but I still couldn't place it, even though it was the same voice from the Jinjutsu. Konoha and IWA would destroy them if they found out. Fine, let's go die in Konoha. If Kichiro backs us up, we'll be fine. I'm pretty sure. Konoha is too nice to kill anyone asking for shelter. I hope. Chapter 34, Part 6. When I woke up properly, I was lying in a hospital bed. There was someone sitting in the corner of the room next to what looked like a crib. I lifted my head slightly and saw one of Sakumo's dogs curled at the foot of the bed. It was the middle of the night. I didn't feel ready to have anyone fussing over me and asking questions. I didn't want to move, so I spent several hours watching the moonlight rise on the wall in front of me, waiting for it to hit the clock on the wall that was just barely shadowed enough so that I couldn't read it. Out of nowhere, a baby started to cry in the corner of the room. I could see the person sitting in the corner of the room stand up, then heard a male voice humming to the easily calmed infant, but no matter how hard I strained my eyes, I couldn't figure out who it was. Finally, the man stepped into the moonlight, smiling down at a silver-haired child nursing from a bottle. I almost didn't recognize Sakumo. He wore civilian clothes and his saber was nowhere to be seen. I just watched, gaping, as he walked past my bed several dozen times, holding the child long after it had fallen back asleep and singing lullabies. Eventually, it turned to speaking, but I couldn't quite understand him. The baby woke once the sky outside began to lighten, making noises back. A soft knock came from the door before Tsunade pushed her way inside. She laid what I recognized as my medical file on a rolling table, then pushed the dog off the bed. At the animal's indignant yelp, Sakumo glanced up and returned the now sleeping infant to the crib in the corner while the summon disappeared. Tsunade hovered near the edge of the room and the two had a conversation I couldn't hear, periodically glancing at me. Eventually, Sakumo nodded and slowly walked towards me, his hands held out as if he thought I was going to attack him. "Welcome back, Kichiro," he murmured and sat down on the bed beside me. "There were several extremely powerful genjutsus on you when you arrived, and you were brought here by both Iwa Jinchuriki. That was good to know. You're not under an active genjutsu right now, as far as we can tell, but it might be a while before you get back on your feet." Tsunade took over the explanation, but stayed near the door. "You did a passable job healing yourself up so you wouldn't die. Medics managed to patch up everything life-threatening, but they can't do anything until they know you're free of the genjutsus. Someone from the interrogation department will have to take you through the captive recovery program." I opened my mouth to respond, but Sakumo shook his head. "Don't try to talk, your throat is extremely raw, you'll only hurt yourself." Tsunade continued. "You don't have any way to determine whether or not this is a genjutsu, which is why we haven't given you any information you can't get on your own. Anything we tell you now will be called into question later." I nodded. "Basically, captive recovery is just to force you to dispel any genjutsus the medics missed, make sure you're clear of anything anyone might have put inside of you, seals that might have been applied, and there's no latent injuries. Then a Yamanaka will go through your memories since you left to get a more accurate report, since only they can tell the difference between a genjutsu memory and a real one." I nodded again. I already knew the procedure. I had to perform it twice before the war began on several genin who wouldn't allow any adults near them after being imprisoned by bandits for a week. Sakumo glanced at Tsunade and she knocked twice on the door to let in a small man with fake glasses. Sakumo left with his son, immediately followed by Tsunade, leaving us alone. Before doing anything, the man blacked out the windows and lit a candle, placing it on a rickety table between us. Dispelling a general genjutsu in battle was simple and straightforward. A pulse of chakra usually did the trick. When targeted directly with a genjutsu, it gets harder, simply because whoever is doing the targeting knows how their target thinks and how to make sure they don't even realize they were in the genjutsu to begin with. Even then, once identified, it could be dispelled the same as a general one. In battle, genjutsu was a distraction, like throwing sand in the opponent's face or rolling marbles underneath their feet to get some breathing room. With time and some talent, it could be used on a captured opponent, and if they're properly restrained, they are unable to dispel it, whether they know they're under a genjutsu or not. A genjutsu master could layer countless genjutsus, each only altering a tiny aspect of their reality, until there was no way to determine what was real and what wasn't. It was terrifying to think about and even worse in practice, though it was an effective way to get information, because it could twist reality until their thoughts were vocalized. I resigned myself to learning an entirely new code system for messages. The most disturbing part was that the QB didn't or couldn't break me out of them. I was glad my stomach was empty, because I snapped several genjutsus that had altered my sense of balance and general equilibrium. The man walking me through the process never gave his name, and I didn't ask. It didn't take long for me to give up on keeping track of time. The candle never seemed to burn down, and I figured he didn't want me knowing how much time passed. I wasn't exactly sure when I passed out from exhaustion, but when I woke, the man and the candle were gone and the room was lit by faint sunlight. Sakumo sat on the bed beside me, one hand on the side of my face, the other holding tight to my hand. He smiled lightly as I made eye contact with him. I opened my mouth to say something, I didn't know what, but he shook his head. "Don't try to talk, it'll only hurt." Sakumo shifted and put both hands gently on either side of my head, then pressed his forehead against mine. You're safe, I promise, he said quietly, looking directly into my eyes before pulling away when the door opened. A Yamanaka stood on the other side of the bed. Kichiro, calm down and look at me, Sakumo said. I didn't even realize I was hyperventilating. Kichiro, just focus on me. No, I managed to say, but Sakumo was right, it hurt to force out the words. Don't, Sakumo pulled me upright and held me tightly against his chest, my face turned away from the Yamanaka. No one is going to hurt you, Kichiro. You're safe here. Before I could protest, another hand was on the back of my head and I was unconscious. I wasn't sure how much time had passed once I woke up, but Sakumo was pacing back and forth with an infant in his hands, crooning at the child. After a few minutes, he realized I was awake and sat down beside me, quietly introducing me to the child. I barely registered he was speaking. Only then did I truly realize that something had gone horribly wrong. I tried to skim through my memories, but there were gaps, massive gaps that were either from extremely dangerous genjutsu or a powerful assortment of seals. I tried to sit up, but my muscles weren't responding. Sakumo disappeared for a moment then returned without the infant. Tsunade appeared seconds later alongside another medic I vaguely recognized as the Sandame's wife. I fell limp as both leaned over me. After a minute of watching healing chakra course through my torso, Tsunade murmured something to Sakumo and left. The Sandame's wife ended the jutsu a minute later and followed Tsunade. Sakumo gathered me up in his arms and just talked, repeatedly carding his fingers through my hair. I turned my face away from him to hide the tears dripping out of my eyes. And four stuck out of my hand and I noticed that I had lost a significant amount of body fat and muscle. My body was young enough to regain it reasonably quickly, but I didn't remember losing the weight. When I finally calmed down, Sakumo offered me a small bowl filled with some kind of liquid and a straw sticking out of it. It's just broth. You don't have to finish it, we just have to see if you can keep food down. Your stomach was damaged and the medics need to know how well it healed. The smell made me hungry. With shaking hands, I guided the straw to my mouth with the hand that wasn't bandaged against my chest while Sakumo held me upright. When I had sucked down a quarter of the broth, Sakumo pulled it away and waited for it to settle in my stomach. When there were no ill effects, he let me consume the rest. I was still hungry, but Sakumo didn't offer anything more and my throat hurt too much to ask. He laid me back on the bed and stared into my eyes with an unreadable expression. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep. When I woke again, Sakumo was gone and Kushina was lying on the bed beside me with a book propped up on the pillow beside my head. "Ni-chan!" she exclaimed when she saw my eyes open. My lips cracked as they stretched into a smile and the muscles ached, but I ignored it and just reached up to hug her. "You're back," she breathed as she buried her face in my shoulder. Her touch was gentle, barely there. "I'm back," I responded, my throat aching. "I'm sorry I left. I shouldn't have." "It's okay, Ni-chan. You didn't have a choice. You never would have left if it wasn't important. I feel like I have something important to tell you but I can't remember what it is." Kushina sat up on the bed. I relaxed against her hand as she brushed my bangs off my forehead and gently stroked my cheek, tracing one of the thin white scars I couldn't explain. "The Yamanaka said he managed to access your memories from while you were in IWA, however he said he didn't want to try to unlock the memories. Did they tell you what was in them?" "No, everything about you is so classified that only Sakumo-sensei, the Hokage, and one or two others know. I was told that. Not even the Yamanaka was allowed to remember anything." She gently pulled the sheets off my torso to reveal more bandages than I expected. I thought I healed much more than that. "Is there any pain? Can you breathe?" "I'm fine," I responded, wincing as she laid a hand over where I remembered the sword going in. The heat from her skin burned through the cool, damp bandages. It wasn't particularly painful, but I couldn't stop myself from tensing and squeezing my eyes shut. I was tired of the pain, sick of it. When I glanced down, there were several pinpricks of red soaking through the white linen. My right arm was bound against my chest, and the rest of my limbs were loosely restrained with bandages. The injuries were bad. "Can you unwrap it so I can see?" I asked her as pleasantly as I could, but her expression went from worried to irritated in an instant. Instead of hitting me, she pinched my side. I tried to roll away, but couldn't move more than an inch. The restraints were a recent addition, probably added after the last time I was awake and somewhat coherent for an extended period. I knew for a fact they weren't present before. Tsunade-sama says you should know your limits. Everything has been taken care of. You have nothing to worry about. Hokage-sama said that once you started talking to us, I would be given leave for a few months to stay with you while you recovered. You mean, the Hokage wants me under guard and Sakumo can't do it? She grimaced. No, I used my accumulated leave time to be here. This doesn't have anything to do with any scheming. I'm sorry, Kushina, I didn't mean. It's okay. You can have a look at your file to see what the deal is. Your chakra is still a bit wonky from the Jinjutsus, so I wouldn't recommend messing with it just yet. She put the folder across my hips, untied the restraints, and hurried out. The room was empty except for a crib in the corner with a sleeping infant. I slowly propped myself up to look at the file, but it was all coded and gave me a headache trying to break the new code. Several minutes later, arguing voices approached my door. Finished making sure of his loyalties less than an hour ago. You can't interrogate him already. Only Uchiha Madara has ever been reported to be capable of controlling the Kyuubi, and you confirmed that you're the only loyal Uchiha who might be capable of such a feat. Someone else has that ability and we need to know who. I automatically recognized the Hokage's voice. It can wait. Kagami responded firmly. It cannot. We've been fighting IWA for months, and suddenly I'm finding out they may have more skills in reserve and our entire village could be compromised. I can't afford to wait. He thinks he's been gone for 6 months. I can't help whatever they did to him. It was your mistakes that put him there in the first place. I did the best I could. We can't do anything about the Jinjutsu user, whether they're from IWA or not. The boy is barely aware of where he is, much less what happened. Give him a break, time to process what is going on. There is no time. He's safe here, that's going to have to be enough. Stop and think about what you're doing before you go in there, Hiruzen. The boy already hates you because of that damn seal you put on him. The Yamanaka already went through his head and told you everything. Some of his memories were indecipherable. No matter how intelligent he is, he's still a child. Those memories are from before the war began. There's no indication that they have any connection. He's good at communicating his thoughts, but he's not perfect. The Yamanaka should not have looked at anything except what happened in IWA. The violation of protocol irritated me, but I decided not to press the issue. You know that's not the reason, the Yamanaka said as much. Time and time again that boy has proven himself trustworthy and reliable. This antagonistic suspicion is completely unwarranted. Kagami, you know as well as I that he's hiding something. You already confronted Sakumo about it, and he said he knew what it was. You can trust him. Can I? I trusted Danzo, only to find out he was going behind my back. The boy called him out on it like it was obvious. Danzo made some mistakes, but he's still loyal and has proven it several times over. Did you ever ask the boy how he knew? I was a bit preoccupied at the time with the two of them fighting in the middle of my office, the Kyuubi about to escape, and potential treason. Is that why you're suspicious of him? Because he noticed something you missed? I asked Danzo about it. He has no knowledge of how the boy figured it out, and your student knows nothing of the situation. Of course he wouldn't admit to a then 9-year-old inadvertently finding a hole in a network he managed to hide from everyone else. I don't know anyone who would, including you and me. For all we know, he has a perfectly reasonable and intelligent explanation for everything. Unless you can prove he's untrustworthy, lead him be. The Namake's boy and his sister have done some impressive stunts to make sure they could spend time with him. Somehow, despite everything, this war hasn't corrupted their innocence, so I'm advising you to let the matter lie. Over the course of this war, the three of them, as genin, have done more for village morale than any jonin, and that includes you. Don't ruin it. Kagami stomped away. After a long pause, there was a tentative knock at the door. I held my breath and didn't respond. Hokage-sama? Sakumo's voice called out several seconds later. Hatake-san, I was just looking for you. Did you get the report on the ANBU patrol sent to assist the Chunin on the Kiri border? With all due respect, Hokage-sama, I officially retired from ANBU several months ago. I'm no longer authorized to report on ANBU activities. Are you alright? I apologize, I'm just a little distracted right now. Are you ready to speak with Kichiro? Tsunade said he would be waking up within the hour and you mentioned that you would need to. A long pause preceded his answer. No, it's not urgent. When will you be able to return to service? 3 days ago, my infant son was placed in the bingo books and we agreed that I would be taken off active duty instead of leading his defense to a team and holding up more resources. Your wife? My wife died in childbirth, Sakumo cut in coldly. Right, my condolences. Apologies, I have work to do. Perhaps you should wait here to see Buwako-sama when she comes by. You don't look too well. Thank you, but no, I have work to do. You said. I have to ask you to verify your identity. Sakumo growled, suspicious. The walls hummed to life across the walls and door. An infant's wail sounded from the crib and I realized I wasn't alone in the room. Sakumo started to knock out a code I could barely hear on the wall. I slid out of the bed and walked on wobbly legs to the baby's crib. I made my hand glow with medical ninjutsu and held it just out of the child's reach, which immediately captivated the infant. I could control my chakra just fine, but I wasn't ready to attempt jutsu or heal anyone except myself. I didn't dare touch the infant while the Hokage responded with a verification code, or 3. A few seconds later, the security seals went down and Sakumo quickly entered, closing the door behind him, a bottle for the baby in one hand and a burp rag in the other. Did you just threaten the Hokage with a bottle? I asked, hoarse. Kichiro! He spun around in alarm. You're awake. You're standing. Yeah, baby's crying and a very dangerous seal that would kill a gnat without a verified chakra signature activating is a bit difficult to sleep through. Sorry about that, I overreacted. Kakashi was born, then you came back with 2 Jinchuriki and looking like hell, then some idiot put a bounty on Kakashi's head. Kakashi? My son. He gestured proudly at the baby staring at my glowing hand. Almost a month old. I didn't think Sakumo would even hear the response I wanted to give because Kakashi had caught sight of his father and was smiling in his direction. Sakumo tucked the bottle into his pocket and lifted the child into one arm and throwing the other around my shoulders, steering me back to the bed. Tsunade will skin me alive if she finds out I let you walk around before you got one last check over. I'm fine. I protested. I wasn't fine. My limbs were shaky, but not as emaciated as my delirious memory recalled. My chakra felt strange and my balance was off, not to mention the ache from the injuries. I was well enough to be discharged though. Well, you're a bag of bones, so we'll go out and get you something as soon as she shows up and gives the all clear. In fact, if you hold Kakashi and feed him, I can get Tsunade right now. I'm sure you're more than ready to get out of the hospital. We're all ready for you to get out. As soon as I sat down, Sakumo placed Kakashi in my arms and stuffed the bottle in the baby's mouth. He was kind enough to leave the burp cloth before he zipped out of the room. Before I could adjust my grip on Kakashi, who looked like he was about to cry at Sakumo's disappearance, he returned with Tsunade in tow. Hatake-san, I don't understand what the rush is. Tsunade protested impatiently. I want some time with my student before his family of hellions get their claws in him and I don't see him for a few months. Tsunade sighed in exasperation, but didn't refute the point as she performed a basic health assessment while I struggled with Kakashi. I swear he was giving me an evil grin and squirming just to give me trouble. In the back of my mind, something wondered why she didn't just use a diagnostic jutsu, but I ignored it in favor of not dropping the child of one of the deadliest ninja in the village. Take your spawn, Sakumo, he's being mean on purpose. He likes you. Sakumo protested. You may be alright with getting tortured by an infant, but the rest of us aren't. At least the child isn't screaming again at being supposedly abandoned. Tsunade scowled as her hands flew through the familiar routine. It would be easier if you used chakra, I noted quietly to her. Tsunade stiffened, but responded in a stiff voice. I can't use medical ninjutsu anymore. I frowned, not understanding. Tsunade glanced at Sakumo. It's too much of a risk for him not to know, he said, sighing. She took a deep breath and pulled 2 slips of paper off the inside of her wrists. My stomach churned as the disguise on her hands faded away to reveal deep scars around her fingers, hands, wrists, and halfway up her forearms. It had been a long time since I last treated anyone but myself, but just by looking at the scars, I could figure out what happened. Tsunade's hands had been bound with ninja wire and it had severed too many nerves for any other medic to repair. I'd healed several cases like that before, where not only the nerves were practically destroyed, but the chakra pathways as well. If the victim was bound for too long, the nerves would die and the chakra pathways would shrivel. Before I left, I hadn't had a chance to explain more than the basics of my technique to heal it, making me the only one able to help her. From the way she manipulated things in her hands, the seals gave her some control, but it needed her chakra, which was drawn from the undamaged tenketsu higher on her arm, but it was impossible to learn to heal others with new tenketsu once a ninja left their teenage years. Their chakra just wasn't flexible enough. Using jutsu wasn't too big of a challenge, but medical techniques required much more control. Tsunade pulled back and reapplied the seals before I could determine what I needed to do to fix the damage. It's too late, even for you, Kichiro. The scar tissue has set. I shook my head. It would hurt like hell, but it's not too late. It's a simple surgery, it shouldn't take more than a half hour. I just have to destroy the scar tissue, reattach and reawaken the nerves, then the chakra pathways. Chakra pathways? I thought you said you used a seal. Not an actual seal, just part of the theory behind one. It only works on the chakra pathways. We'll talk about this later, Tsunade stated. Kichiro, you're good to go, all 3 of you, out, now. Sakumo picked me up, baby and all, and was out the window before I could say a word. We landed outside his house and he set me down, taking Kakashi from me with ease. Come on, takeout should be on its way. Where are my real clothes? I asked, looking down at the hospital shirt and shorts. They went directly into the trash. The stuff that was in your pockets are in a box at my home. Somehow, your weapons made it back with you, as well as some of your gear. It's all sealed in a scroll, which is also in the box. I got you some new civilian clothes and put them under the sink in the main guest bathroom. Go down this hall and take your first right, then it'll be the second door on your left. I'll be in the main room right here. He jerked his head towards the room to the left. I nodded and set out. To be frank, the house was huge. While the Hatake clan only had a small handful of members, it was made up entirely of well-respected jonin. Or, at least it was before the war. I was nearly certain Sakumo and Kakashi were the last 2 survivors. I found the bathroom without a problem and decided to bathe before returning to Sakumo. I sat in the tub and filled it with a few inches of hot water, painstakingly unwinding the bandages and healing myself. It took an hour and I had to empty the tub several times and refill it with clean water, but after an hour, what was left of the damage was nothing but dull pain and bright scarring. I could have healed the scar, but I chose not to. Scars like that could come in handy and I could always heal it later if I needed to. I pulled on the clothes then headed back to where Sakumo was feeding baby Kakashi. I sat down across from him. You have questions, he murmured as Kakashi started to drift off to sleep. How long was I gone? I asked. I thought it had only been 6 months at the most, but I didn't trust my memory. Just over 17 months. I stiffened. You're wrong, you have to be. It couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 months. I'm certain. It's the first week of October now. Where did I miss the time? The Yamanaka said various sections of your memory had been intentionally locked away, which warped your sensation of time. He couldn't figure out how, but due to the content, he didn't try to undo it. Eventually, they will fail, but hopefully not until Konoha is in a position to handle the backlash they will cause on you. We're most concerned with the effects of the Jinjutsu. Luckily, it wasn't as long-term as we originally feared. The day you spent with the Gobi Jinchuriki until you started the dispelling process was influenced by Jinjutsu. Not even the Yamanaka could determine what was real or not. We suspect it was from a third party, mostly because it wasn't manipulating you, just tormenting you by magnifying the pain, feeding you false images in the place of reality, causing you to move in ways that prevented further healing. The Jinchuriki were significantly worse off, under a Jinjutsu that forced loyalty for several years, if not more, but exposure to the Kyuubi's chakra and IWA broke it and they faked it well enough until they could grab you and run. Are they still here? Yes. They claimed they were willing to do anything to gain a village's trust and prove their loyalty once they had your assurance that Konoha was the right village, but they refused to become missing nin. I slumped back in the chair, almost sliding off. Sakumo laid Kakashi on a thick blanket on the floor when a knock sounded from the door. He returned a minute later with the takeout, which he placed on the coffee table and motioned me down to sit across from him. Eat, he ordered, pushing a box towards me. I had no problem obeying. I was starved. As I grabbed the chopsticks, I realized it was nothing more than miso broth and a few vegetables. I reluctantly put the utensils down and picked up the bowl to slurp up the broth while Sakumo dug into a much more appetizing plate filled with meat and rice. There's more you're not telling me, I stated as I debated whether it was worth risking upsetting my stomach by stealing some of the more substantial food off his plate. There's a lot I shouldn't tell you. I'm sure you can say how IWA reacted to their Jinchuriki kidnapping me. Sakumo slapped my hand as I stealthily tried to snatch a bite of fish from him. I still managed to get the bite to my mouth. IWA broke the treaty 2 months after it was established by having one of their clans attack Konoha. The Aburame were almost entirely responsible for driving them off. A second, much larger assault force made it partway into the Land of Fire before a group of 16 Konoha Jonin used a suicide jutsu to wipe out almost half of them. They retreated, but in the past few months, they've nearly regained the ground lost. Sakumo didn't meet my eye and his tone was flat. You were there, I surmised, abandoning my attempt to steal another bite. Yes, he answered quietly. Kagami-sensei was in charge and most of the force sent out to stall IWA had already died, it was just the core left over. Sensei was in the thickest of the fighting and I was running support alone, trying to make up for the Chunin who died. I was about to send up the signal for reinforcements, when one of the Jonin ran back and ordered me to retreat as fast as I could. I started to pull back, but didn't get far before the Jonin linked their arms and made a seal I didn't recognize. The entire battlefield stopped to watch in morbid fascination. Sensei figured out what they were doing and barely managed to get behind them, out of the line of fire. I don't know what they did, but I could only describe it as their spirits leaving their bodies. They swept through the battlefield in a long chain and anyone they touched died instantly. IWA fled and in a minute, Kagami and I were the only living people left. I lost my appetite in a hurry and set my chopsticks down. You coming back hasn't helped or hurt anything but our peace of mind. An entire division was lost in one battle? I asked hollowly. 3 divisions were sent out. It was a suicide mission to begin with, Kichiro. 2 people came back and it was 2 people more than expected. We faced the entirety of Iwa's invasion force and put them on the run after 5 days of battle. That's 150 people, at least, dead in a single battle, not including Iwa's casualties. 208 Konoha ninja died in that battle. Most battles haven't been that costly, but there will be another one like it in the near future. Sakumo let that sink in before changing the topic of conversation to Kakashi. Over the next hour, I learned more about the month-old infant than I cared to. I didn't ask about his wife, I didn't want to know what happened. I could tell Sakumo was using everything he could to distract himself from her death. I let him ramble on until we finished eating. Only then did Sakumo direct the conversation back towards catching me up on events in the village. Kiri and Suna had been completely defanged and were staying out of further conflict. Most of Suna's fighting force had been decimated. Sakumo boasted about how he figured out a way to cut the strings of the puppet brigade with his unique saber and attack them directly, shattering the last of Suna's supposedly ironclad defense, which I had cracked with immunizations to their poisons. Even though he knew I would disapprove, he told me that Konoha had methodically cut down anyone who opposed them once they entered the village, civilian or shinobi, and destroyed any goods Suna could use for anything more than feeding themselves. If Suna had hard times before the war, their situation was 10 times worse now. They wouldn't be raising a military for a long time, and it would be at least a decade before they started to recover. And Kiri, because the Mizukage had chosen to surrender rather than follow in Tsuna's footsteps and lose most of his core fighting force in one go. The entire land of water was divided on the issue, and it was extremely likely a civil war would break out as soon as the side opposing the Mizukage gained a leader. I listened impassively, doing my best to detach myself from the implications and only taking in the facts. Kumo knew when they had been beat and would have done almost anything to stop the periodic Biju rampages. A promise of peace with Konoha was worth it, though only the Reikage and the highest-ranked shinobi knew they gave up one Biju to secure the other. The Hachibi Jinchuriki, B, had sent several letters addressed to me through the diplomatic channels after an attempt to sneak off to visit me had failed when he was caught by Konoha patrols and sent home with a handful of bruises and a damaged pride. It was a good thing Konoha had a policy on only killing aggressive foreign genin and tossing the rest back over the border a little roughed up. Content that Konoha wasn't greedy and willing to maintain the treaty where any other village would have broken it. Kumo opened negotiations for an alliance, which Konoha snapped up like a starving child scrounging for fallen pieces of rice. Outside of the village, Konoha was holding its own against IWA and buddying up with Kumo. Inside, Konoha was a mess. I had easily put down the first civilian protest, but as soon as the Hokage regained control, the civilians rioted. Enough ninja made it back to protect the shinobi clans from attacks and vandalism, as well as the merchants and shop owners who supplied shinobi. The Hokage created an actual program for the retired shinobi and academy students, which led to an increase in academy enrollment from the civilian sector. Children older than 6 didn't need parental consent to join said program, they only needed a retired shinobi, a significant number of whom banded together to create a formal roster to make it easier for the civilian children to approach them and find sponsors. Even though the academy had been suspended, genin were still making it into the ranks, and with the help of the rest of the retirees, they were gaining the skills they needed to be promoted to chunin, even without their jonin senseis. The only rank not receiving a regular influx of new blood was jonin. The standards for genin and chunin had been relaxed, but no one dared to mess with the standards for tokubetsu jonin and jonin. Genin were now forced to run supplies and deliver orders into the field due to the losses the chunin had taken over the course of the war. Even so, for both groups, assignments to the front lines rarely lasted more than a few weeks for the most experienced. However, jonin assignments lasted for months at a time, and they were often forced to take back-to-back missions. I knew it had to be worse for ANBU. They had to do it all without being seen, without the support and recognition jonin received. The anti-shinobi sentiment only seemed to increase when the mentorship program exploded with success, which was one of the reasons the Hokage started to let the genin run missions outside of the village, and created a boarding program to keep academy students and genin from being swayed away from shinobi life because of their parents or other adults. Before I left, the martial law had been almost non-existent, and all the Hokages had taken a non-violent approach, catering to most civilian demands, such as stopping ninja recruitment from civilian schools and public civilian places. Now, the Sandaime had been forced to institute the strictest laws and enforcement of them they had ever seen, and the civilians were chafing against it. There was a single warning policy the civilians hated the most. If they were caught breaking a rule, they would receive a red mark on the back of their hand that wouldn't wash off for several weeks. If they were caught again before the mark faded, they were fined or executed, depending on the severity. Illegal assembly and speech were executable offenses. Keeping lights on after curfew was fined. What surprised me was that only full jonin and ANBU were exempt from the rules. Chapter 35. It's not right, I snapped at Sakumo once he finished. Tightening the rules and increasing the penalties, I mean. No, it's not, and no one likes it, but one of the most common complaints from the civilians is that the shinobi aren't subject to the law, that they can do whatever they wish. With the Uchiha police either dead or fighting and the rest of the jonin only in the village long enough to get some rest and spend a few hours with their families, shinobi seem a lot more approachable, so they're acting out. They're starting a civil war, and the Hokage is only making things worse with the oppressive regulations and the terror campaign. The answer to disobedience isn't instituting more rules, that only adds fuel to the fire. Is the Hokage an idiot? Calm down, Kichiro, he ordered. Now is not the time to oppose or criticize the Hokage, we need to be unified. Unity isn't going to happen like this. You know better than to stand against the Hokage. I'm one of the few people who actually does. Yes, insubordination seems to be a point of pride for you. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I refuse to let people live under someone accountable only to themselves when I can do something about it. You have to trust the Hokage. No, I don't have to do anything. I most certainly do not have to trust anyone. Sakumo's head fell into his hand. You haven't changed. What the civilians are doing is wrong, but that doesn't mean the Hokage is right. But you are? Not necessarily, but I know I have a new, valid perspective that can help. Look, I think you need to let the Hokage and his advisors figure it out on their own. You just came back and you're not supposed to be doing anything stressful for a few weeks. I'm still a medic, I won't overstretch myself. Maybe, but every time you go up against the Hokage, you've come out worse for wear. One of these days, you're going to accidentally step over the line. So? He won't kill me, and it's not like he'll be able to lock me away and forget about me for very long, not with the war going on. You have no idea, do you? What? The Hokage put a lot of trust in you when he left the village with you. Yeah, and leadership wasn't in my contract with the village. He never rescinded your security clearance. Then he's even more of an idiot. Kichiro! What? I was a hostage and he should have knocked my security clearance down to civilian level the second he regained control. Taking control of the village was meant to be your test for candidacy. What? Any person considered for the post of Hokage has to pass a test of leadership. Yours was a bit early. I never agreed to be considered for the post of Hokage. It's not something you choose. Didn't you think it was strange that the Hokage left you in charge with almost no training and experience? I figured he was setting up Konoha as a decoy so he could launch a larger counterattack with a home field advantage. No, the Hokage would never have tried something that risked fighting inside the village. Needless to say, you passed the test with flying colors. A fair head and firm hand in discipline, the ability to hold the respect of your peers and elders. They were a bunch of kids. They're your future subordinates. You have a good head for negotiating, policy making. I don't want this. Give it 10 or 20 years and you could be the Hokage. No, never. I know you well enough to see that you have a way to fix what you see as broken in this village that none of the rest of us understand. As Hokage you could do it. He was right, but I knew better. I'm certain I could fix it. I could set up a government that makes most people happy, but does that make me better than anyone else? I'll answer that. It makes me no better than people like Uchiha Madara who thought he could bring peace by holding everyone under his thumb. Unilateral action never turns out well, and I'm not going to make myself the villain by pushing my ideals on everyone else. Kichiro. I'm going to go for a walk. I stood up and marched out, my hands deep in my pockets. Hold on, Kichiro. Sakumo grabbed my arm on the way out. Wear this. He pressed a conical hat into my hand. To hide your hair and the seal on your forehead. I jammed it on my head and marched out. Straight face. I ended up walking all over the village, just watching the civilians interact. No one recognized me and no one tried to stop me. A few hours after setting out, I saw a middle-aged store owner struggling to carry a large crate. What are you doing just standing there, boy? Give me a hand or move along. I shrugged before taking half the weight of the crate, which I suspected was full of glass from the way it clinked, ignoring his suspicious glare and helped bring it inside. The place looked like the lab for a medieval mad scientist. The name's Hideaki. Kichiro, I mumbled back. You're strong for your age. Did you drop out of the academy or something? I shrugged. Chunin. Why aren't you in uniform? I grunted. He snorted. My sons were shinobi. The younger got himself captured and mutilated in IWA, came home in a box too big for him, and the older vanished into thin air. I got a letter confirming his death, but no body. Damn kid thought he could take on Hanzo the salamander, and the team who found him were hard-pressed to do more than identify his body. Their stuff is still upstairs in their room. Little bastards, they should have retired when I told them to. I could have set them up with almost any job they wanted. I'll give you the same advice I gave them, retire while you're still alive too. Can't. Why not? I shrugged. Because I'm a Jinchuriki didn't seem to be a very good way to continue the conversation. You're not much of a talker. What do you do here? I asked, changing the subject. I fix things. Anything, really. Toys, clothes, pots, weapons, pets. It's good money. People don't seem to be able to do jack shit for themselves. It's fine with me, though. As long as I pay my taxes and keep my nose clean, nobody cares about grumpy old me. Good thing too, or I'd end up dead and stuck with my bastard sons again, considering the state of affairs. Just wait, in a few minutes, those crazy civilians are going to come marching down the street shouting and banging things. They do it every day. The only good thing about it is that things always get broken. Mostly people nowadays, since those idiots can't go to the hospital when they get hurt while breaking the law. He sat down at a desk and started noisily tapping at an impressive dent in the side of a pot. I took a seat a few feet away and watched. What are you really doing, kid? The dent slowly started to disappear. I was going for a walk. I don't really know anymore. Someone piss you off? No, they told me some things I didn't want to hear. He didn't have anything to say to that. A little while later, an angry shout sounded on the street outside. There they go again, the man grumbled. I would increase my prices in the hope that they would stop being such idiots when it started hitting their pockets, but it won't do a damn thing and I might as well keep making money. He pulled out a roll of thread from a drawer as well as a small box of what appeared to be sewing needles. You really ought to sanitize those needles before you stick them in people. He snorted. It makes me feel better to know they might not spread their idiocy. They think they're doing the right thing, you know. It doesn't mean they thought of all the implications of it. Look kid, this is a civilian problem all of you ninjas shouldn't be mixed up with in the first place. It happens every few years and it's only happening now because we're at war and things have gotten bad enough to need shinobi to disperse the protesters. Is that what most people think, or just you? Depends on which most people you're thinking of. The civilian populace, for the most part, is perfectly fine with the Hokage and military, it's just one faction is much more vocal than everyone else. I see. At that, the first of the injured stumbled into the shop. I'm gonna die. The man panicked, clutching his arm. Then stop being an idiot and you won't. Hideaki rolled his eyes and peeled the man's hand away from the wound. I'd gotten worse cuts when training. The ninja attacked us, the idiot exclaimed. Oh really? What building did you throw rotten fruit at this time? We weren't doing anything this time. I'll believe that when I see my miso soup come to life and dance like a geisha. I could oblige, I muttered to Hideaki so only he could hear. He just glared at me as he wrapped the man's arm and demanded twice the rate the hospital charged. You have family to see and whoever you walked out on to apologize to, kid, now get out of my shop. He tossed a few coins in my direction. I caught them with one hand. For the help. I shrugged and left. I wandered a few streets over, eventually stopping in front of a sweet shop for something to chew on as I made my way back to Sakumo's house, saving one of the Japanese-style donuts for Sakumo. I knocked softly on his door. Come in, Kichiro, he called. I warily let myself in, brushing off my feet on the front mat. Belatedly, I noticed I was still barefoot from the hospital, and entered the house, glancing into the main room where I had left Sakumo. He was sitting on the floor with Kakashi propped up on his knees, playing with the baby. I stayed out of the child's line of sight, even though he probably couldn't see more than a few feet in front of him at best. Sweet? I offered. He shook his head and I took a bite instead. Where did you get the money? He asked dubiously, as it vanished a few seconds later. Kushina changed the verification codes for your bank account and I don't have any money in the house. I shrugged, unashamed of the supposed gluttony. I had certainly not gotten the number of meals I needed while in IWA, and I was fairly certain it had been at least a week, if not longer since I last ate anything solid, excluding the current day. Helped a guy move a crate. Nice man, he gave me enough to buy a whole box of these, but I ate all the others. I think it was partially a bribe for not squealing on the fact he stitches up and overcharges protesters as a side job, but that's irrelevant. I'll pretend I didn't hear that. Anyways, are you going to be Kakashi's uncle or big brother? I did not sign up for this, I answered. Brother it is, he turned to Kakashi. Tachan has some work to do and you're going to stay right here with your big brother Kichiro inside the big, safe, sealed house while Tachan does his work, okay? Kakashi gurgled a response. I didn't sign up to be your babysitter. I protested, but Sakumo ignored me. Be good for your new brother, Sakumo said cheerfully to both of us as he settled the infant in my arms. If it wasn't for the fact that Sakumo was a jonin and could make me take care of his spawn, I would have walked away. I just fed him, so would you be so kind as to burp him? I'll be back in an hour. Sakumo left in a hurry. Kakashi smiled up at me in all his gummy infant glory, and I swear there was an evil glint in his eye. Don't you dare forget that I can pretend to be completely incompetent at childcare and your father wouldn't suspect a thing. He gurgled up at me as I took off my hat and sat down, picking up the burp cloth draped across the arm of the couch. After a few good burps and the need to clean up his spit up, which somehow missed the rag and ended up on my shirt, twice, I tried to lay Kakashi down on his blanket, only to find the brat had caught a fistful of my hair and wasn't going to let go of his newest brightly colored toy. At least he only chewed on it and didn't try and pull. Good for you, you caught my hair, but it's not nice to grab people's hair, Kakashi, please let go. He babbled back at me. Okay, you are much smarter than any infant your age ought to be, and I see that, but it doesn't make it okay, please let go. His head hit my shoulder as he continued to speak baby into my clothes. I'm not your father, so I don't know what all your little sounds and motions mean. Be a bit clearer, please. When he looked back up at me, I would swear he was giving me a stink eye. Sleep is always a good thing. Why don't you go to sleep, and I'll go to sleep and neither of us has to deal with the other, what do you think? That look was definitely the stink eye. Giving mean looks to almost strangers isn't very nice, Kakashi. He waved his hands in my direction. I'm not your father, I don't know what the hand-waving means. Kakashi smiled, and I swear it was the most diabolical thing I had ever seen. Why couldn't Sakumo have a normal infant? I complained. One that just wanted a diaper change, food, and to be held during long naps. Kakashi's face twisted and suddenly he started to wail. I'm sorry. You're a perfect baby even though you are way smarter than you ought to have a right to be. Please stop crying, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Why am I talking to you like you're 20 times your age? I doubt you're understanding more than a few words in every sentence. I think I lost it. Imagine that, I survive what amounts to torture, only to lose it when trying to take care of a baby. How the hell does that make sense? You know what, I'm blaming you, Kakashi. At least you've stopped crying now. That's a good thing, right? I don't smell anything so I just upset you somehow. How do I upset someone who is less than 2 months old with just words? When Kakashi only grinned at me with his fists in his mouth, I groaned and let my head fall back on the couch. He just gurgled at me before starting to squirm. I laid him on his back on the cushion beside me, but he started screaming the second I let go. Oh, shut up. If you want to squirm, you can lay on the couch. If you want me to hold you, then no trying to make me drop you, that's the deal. I swear he understood every word I said. The screaming subsided, but he still cried until I picked him back up. You are a manipulative little brat, you know that? He let his head fall on my shoulder after sending me a satisfied smile, his hands in his mouth. I'll like you only if you help me troll your father. Kakashi mumbled into my shoulder. If you're asking how, I have no idea beyond not letting anyone but him change your diaper. There's not much else you can do at this age besides make noises and scream. Yeah, maybe make your first word something funny, or refuse to speak at all and just give your father that evil grin of yours when he makes you try. I want to see the look on his face when your first word is a complete sentence. Like Kichiro is awesome or something like that. Grabbing 2 fistfuls of my shirt, Kakashi started to fall asleep. Sleeping upright isn't good for anyone's neck, I scolded lightly and shifted him to lie in my arms instead. After a minute, I changed my mind. You know what, you're going to sleep safely by yourself, on your back. Babies are always supposed to sleep by themselves on their back. I gently laid Kakashi on the blanket he had been sleeping on earlier and walked over to close the door that could be slid across the window to block out the majority of the light. Just as I reached out, Kakashi screamed. Oh, shut up, you're fine, unless you want to sleep with the sun in your eyes." He quickly subsided into a pitiful wail as I blocked out the sun. When I crouched and awkwardly patted his tiny torso, he quickly stopped and rubbed at his eyes. "See? You're just fine. Now, go to sleep, you're tired." I stood up, and Kakashi screamed, but as soon as I crouched back down, he returned to smiling up at me. "You're an evil little brat. If you were my kid, I would just let you scream, but you're not, and Sakumo would kill me if you walked in and I was ignoring you, so what do you want?" He grinned up at me and waved his arms. At least it wasn't an evil grin. "Just go to sleep." When I started to pull away, his face scrunched up. "You just don't want to be alone," I scowled. "I suppose I can't blame you, you are only a month old after all, but your father is spoiling you. If you grow up to be a callous brat, I'm kidnapping you and fixing that problem very forcefully." He gave me one of those sarcastic "oh, really" looks. "Do you doubt I could kidnap you or that I would be able to fix the problem?" What am I thinking? You can't respond. I don't even know if you're responding to my tone or my actual words. Why don't you use your psychic connection with your father to call him back here? Maybe we could team up and torture him instead of you torturing me. Kakashi kicked his legs while chewing on his fists. "I guess you like that idea. Too bad your father is a jonin and we won't be able to deprive him of sleep enough to make him crazy. Any ideas, Kakashi?" I laid down in my stomach beside him and poked his side obnoxiously. It just made him grin. "You gotta contribute more than legwork, kiddo. Besides, considering how you seem to understand me just fine, you have to be a genius and you're not going to make me, the normal guy, think of everything." Kakashi's attention finally wandered away from me and his eyes drifted closed. "Good baby, go to sleep." There was a small bookshelf opposite the window where I pulled out a jutsu scroll to study while Kakashi slept. When I heard the front door open without an announcement, I was glad Kakashi was on a blanket, because I released the jutsu scroll, wrapped him tightly, and slipped up the door opposite, which opened up to Sakumo's weaponry. The back of my mind admired the impressive array of sharp objects and ninja gear on various shelves, and the collection of mission bags neatly lining the baseboards. Several were in a state of repacking on the table in the center of the room, but I could tell Sakumo was able to drop everything for an emergency mission if need be. My neck prickled and I grabbed the nearest blade and slashed at where an adult's head would be, just as the scroll finished rolling shut. Sakumo flinched even as he caught my wrist easily, even though I put a lot of chakra into the blow, and I saw him draw a kunai in a reflexive counter, barely stopping himself before he stabbed me. I still winced as the point of the kunai drew a few drops of blood from my side. "Good reflexes, kid, but you're rusty." "You're a jonin," I retorted with a scowl. "And I just got out of the hospital." "Fair enough, but I'm going to have to train you up to where you should be." Sakumo pocketed his kunai and took the training tanto from my slackened grip. "Whatever," I grumbled, and returned the still sleeping Kakashi to his father. He simultaneously replaced the tanto and took the child in his right hand. I looked over my shoulder at the weapons room. It was impressive. Sakumo's collection of training blades was arrayed on the nearest wall to my right. Hundreds of kunai were stacked on several shelves on the adjacent wall, and on the wall opposite me, there were 8 duplicates of Sakumo's mission packs. On the wall behind the door, the rest of Sakumo's miscellaneous mission and training supplies were arrayed on shelves. I spotted the lead training rod Sakumo used to teach me the katas for using my twin sticks and build up my strength and speed for when I switched to the wooden ones. There was also a pile of bokkens and a box of senbon that I managed to identify before Sakumo pulled me out and closed the door with his foot. "Now you know where I keep my gear. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I responded, falling back onto one of the couches, watching him care. "Fully." Sure enough, when he picked up the scroll to put it away, not caring if I had finished reading it or not, I noticed a slight tremor in his hand. I was probably overthinking it, but I had to ask. "Why are you shaking?" "I'm not shaking," he sighed, exasperated. "Did you get injured? Is that why the Hokage let you stay in the village?" "No, what makes you say that?" "I don't remember you ever holding Kakashi in your left, even though you would be able to defend him better if you could use your right hand to fight." "I'm not injured." "I suppose you wouldn't mind if I checked. It might be an old injury that never healed properly and you've been compensating without realizing it." "No, I'm fine. You should probably go visit your family. I only brought you here so I could run some errands I couldn't bring Kakashi to. You're the one who claimed I'm rusty, what better way to practice is there? Sakumo laid a hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eye, dead serious. I'm fine, Kichiro, I promise. You can check me over with your medic stuff when I pick you up for training in 3 days, but right now you probably should go spend time with your family, okay? I shrugged, figuring he must have been a little shaken up about something. I was one of the few medics who were willing to completely heal an injury so it didn't have to be put on the shinobi's medical records. I hadn't been approached by any shinobi outside of the hospital since the war started, mostly because I was out of the village. I suspected a number of ones who approached me before the war were ANBU, which was one of the reasons I never told anyone about it. ANBU was a secretive group, understandably, and I wasn't sure there were many medics in their ranks, so they would either have to trust the handful of Jonin medics to heal off books and place the information into their ANBU file only, or wait for the injury to heal by itself. I happened to be a quiet, and not exactly legal alternative. When I thought about it, I probably made a number of high-level connections without even realizing it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling Sakumo was lying to my face about something that wasn't classified. Chapter 36. Here, take the hat for on your way, Sakumo said, thrusting the traditional, conical hat into my hands as I left. And don't bring it back, I hate it. I was mostly used to the occasional odd request from Sakumo and tied the hat on my head without questioning it. After saying my goodbyes to Sakumo and Kakashi, who woke just as I was leaving, it didn't take me long to walk to the Uzumaki house. I figured it had been too long since I last saw them and would be rather impolite and potentially alarming for me to slip into the window, so I knocked on the door and listened to the muffled voices shouting something indecipherable. Ise opened the door, and his face brightened the second he recognized me. It's nice to see you alive and conscious, he murmured and wrapped me in a hug. Before I could open my mouth, he was brushing the dirt from the road off my clothes and taking off my hat. You don't have to hide the seal, he said as I reflexively reached up to cover it when he pulled off my hat. All the kids know about it already, as well as the fact that you're a Jinchuriki. How? I asked warily, keeping my voice low. Fuso and Kushina got into an argument when you were declared MIA after the war with IWA restarted. Some things were slipped and Kushina didn't realize she had left the door open until the damage was already done. Don't worry, the kids aren't allowed to talk about you unless they're in the house and there's only family here. He hugged me again and smoothed my hair. It was a little weird after going what felt like 6 months almost entirely alone, but I didn't mind the contact. Why aren't you armed? He asked. I'm only ever armed when I'm on a mission or training, I answered readily. Fair enough, he shrugged. Are you up to meeting all the kids at once or should I send in a few at a time? Tsunade-sama said you might have problems adjusting. Can I see Minato and Kushina first? Of course, kiddo, I'll wake them up and send them to you. No! You don't have to wake them. Let them sleep, they're probably exhausted. I'll go talk to them once I've seen everyone else. Ise nodded and guided me out of the entryway. The rest of the house was a lot different than what I remembered. Instead of a mostly open space with only a few rooms closed off and temporary dividers closing off individual rooms, the rest of the walls had been built. A long hallway stretched from the front of the house to the back, most of the doors ajar. I glanced inside as I passed the rooms, noting that most of them were bedrooms. Ise stopped at one of the closed doors and knocked. Nagato, are you in there? No, a voice responded. Nagato. I'll come out when it's time for dinner. You can't spend your whole day studying, son. I'm not studying, I'm reading. If Minato gave you another. It's not for Minato, I promise. May I come in? No. I have a surprise for you. I don't care. Nagato. I'll come out for dinner. Ise sighed in exasperation and lowered his voice so Nagato couldn't hear. He's attempting the Genin test in 2 weeks, even though Fuso and I told him he couldn't. We had a fight about it last month and he hasn't cooled down yet. He wouldn't even come when I announced to the others you were back. He doesn't know about you. Does he even remember me? I asked skeptically in the same low tone. He was only 4 when I left. He remembers you, but I'm not sure how much. He wrote you down as a shinobi reference for his genin application. That was the reason Fuso and I found out about it, because those on the MIA list can't be used as references and the application was returned through the mail. Kushina noticed it and gave it to us, so he's mad at her as well. I hate to ask you, but he still really looks up to you as his idol, and if anyone has a chance persuading him to wait to take the test, it's you. It's fine, do you want me to talk to him now or later? How long before they call you back? Tsunade-sama mentioned they could send you out at any time after you're released. I have 3 days before I have a training session with Sakumo. Thank you, Kichiro. He wrapped me in another hug. That's what family's for, right? Everyone will be outside if you need anything. When he released me and walked away, I turned to the door and opened it quietly. Go away, I don't want to talk to you, Nagato grumbled, not even glancing at the door. He sat against the foot of his bed, the book propped up against his knees and tapping his chin with the tip of a kunai. It looked like he only had a few pages left. I slid the door closed behind me and leaned against the wall, surveying the room. From where I stood, his bed was in the far right corner of the room, situated so he could easily face the door as he slept. In the center of the room was a low table cluttered with beginner-level seals and fuinjutsu supplies. In the near corner to my left was a dresser with 2 drawers hanging open to reveal his clothes. Atop the dresser was a small bookshelf, with several books arrayed neatly on it. A kunai pouch lay on the floor beside the head of his bed. Good riddance, he snapped to himself. I waited for him to say something more, but he thought I had already left and went back to reading. I waited for him to finish the last few pages. From what I could gather by reading over his shoulder, he was reading the book on the shinobi rules and regulations. He stood up, walked across the room and replaced it on a small bookshelf. It wasn't until he turned around that he noticed me leaning against the wall. He froze, staring at me, the kunai lodging itself between 2 floorboards. If I was an intruder wishing to kill or capture you, you would have been at my mercy for almost 10 minutes now, Nagato, I told him bluntly. You're MIA, he retorted after he got over enough of his shock. MIA is a nice way of saying a shinobi is either captured or an unconfirmed rogue. Your first reaction to seeing me here and in reasonable health should have been to attack with the kunai you dropped because I'd probably be a missing nin or an enemy with a very good hinge. Belatedly, Nagato crouched, snatched the kunai out of the floor and hurled it at my chest. I was glad my reflexes weren't too dull to catch the blade. Unless you have another, you should never throw your last weapon until you are absolutely sure it is a kill shot and are in the process of following your blade to retrieve it. With a quick step and a little bit of chakra to my legs and feet for speed and traction, I stepped between Nagato and the pouch of training kunai. He looked towards the table with several explosive seals on it, but I cut off that attempt as well. He settled into one of my favorite basic taijutsu forms. When I didn't move, he attacked. It was almost too easy for me to grab his wrist and pull him into my knee before slamming him face down on the floor. He tried to roll over, kicking at my ankles in the process, but a little bit of chakra and his foot just bounced off. I knelt beside him and ground his forehead into the ground. That was a decent try. Who are you? Nagato growled. I'm hurt, it sounded like you recognized me earlier. I suppose I'm not really surprised. You were really little the last time I saw you, and even before that I only spent a few weeks with you. I remember you. He protested vehemently. You sure about that? You haven't said my name or asked me any questions to verify my identity. I suppose I could forgive your lapse, you just started at the academy after all, right? I've been in the academy since I turned 5. Nagato retorted hotly. It doesn't look like it from my perspective. I expected a lot better from you. Stop being mean. Newsflash, kid, all shinobi are mean, they hurt and kill people for a living. I'm not gonna be like that. I snorted. Do yourself a favor then and stay a civilian, because if you keep on this path, you're going to kill people, you're going to tear families apart, you're going to get hurt. Tosan put you up to this, didn't he? Nagato struggled against my grip. He asked me to persuade you not to take the genin test, yes, but I don't care about the stupid test. Then why are you telling me to quit? Lots of reasons. The biggest one is that I love your parents and I don't want anyone to hurt them, even if it's you coming home in a box. He didn't respond, his face reddening in shame. The next reason is that I love my family, even though I haven't seen them in a long time, and I want them to stay safe. You didn't stop Minato and Kushina from being shinobi. He retorted smugly. The two of them didn't suck at defending themselves. Did you know, before they graduated, they were able to take on a Chunin and win? You can't even be bothered to turn around when the door opens. I don't care how angry or upset you are at whoever is supposed to be standing there. There were two of them against one person. They work as a team, Nagato. That means they would stick together and fight together on a mission. You don't have a teammate to help you, so that means I expect that much more out of you. My sensei says I'm really good for my age, he snapped defensively. Your sensei isn't the one with the final say. Nagato looked as if he wanted to cry. If you follow through with taking this Genin test, I will make sure you fail. When you think you're ready, challenge me. If you can beat my taijutsu, even if it takes every skill, jutsu, and trick you have, then I will let you take the test. Hell, I'll make sure you pass it, get on a good team, and get the best sensei the village has to offer. You can't do this, he choked out. Do you want to test that theory? You're staying alive whether you want to or not, Nagato. I released him and pulled him back to his feet, but he only sank back to the floor, crying. I knelt in front of him and brushed his hair out of his eyes. I wasn't sure how Madara had done it, but the Rinnegan was most certainly still dormant and his eyes were a dark brown. I'm sorry, Kichiro-san, he cried and lunged forward to hug me. What happened to Inai-san? I teased and hugged him back. You're not mad at me? I'm not mad. But I hurt you. I'm okay, Nagato, getting mad wouldn't help anything. You know, you did hurt your parents, even if you didn't mean to. You should go apologize to them. He nodded against my shoulder. But not right now. Everyone will be so happy you're back and I don't want to share. I guess I'm fine with that. Do you like the academy? I asked, ruffling his hair. It's not really the academy. One of the old retired shinobi is teaching me, but it's still, you're the one who's been gone a long time. I should be asking you questions. I leaned back on my hands as Nagato parked himself on my lap. I've still been gone and I don't know a lot about what's been going on here. I'm going to tell Minato and Kushina the entire story, and when I do you can listen as well. You still want to be a shinobi, right? He nodded. Okay, then I'll come and get you when I go and talk to our favorite duo. Deal? He nodded again. For now, how about you catch me up on everything I missed? In simple words, Nagato summarized what I missed with the family. It was mostly everyday things, but I missed a number of larger events. Shortly after Nagato started training, the Inuzuka clan had a litter of puppies who couldn't access chakra. Normally, the puppies would have been put down instead of sentencing them to a life without a human counterpart, since the Inuzuka clan was the only clan in Konoha who was made up exclusively of ninja. Kushina found out about them and persuaded the Inuzuka clan head to gift the puppies to the Uzumaki clan. Nagato was of the opinion that the clan head only agreed because the litter had the same number of puppies as the Uzumaki clan had civilian children, which any shinobi knew would be at risk once they began to learn Fuinjutsu. Even though the puppies were unable to access chakra, they were still smart and strong enough to serve as guards, and any ninja, no matter what rank, would hesitate to attack a child guarded by a large dog with Inuzuka markings. Both the puppies and the children loved the arrangement, and the Uzumaki and Inuzuka clans had quickly become the closest clans in the village. Nagato snickered as he recounted several events since that solidified the unlikely friendship. All four of the events Nagato knew over explosive arguments between two members of the clan that somehow always ended with the two clans taking over the nearest restaurant and sharing a meal. It was completely illogical and unlikely, and no one else dared to get involved. A group of 4 Uzumaki women appeared at the Konoha gates while Kushina was negotiating for the dogs. They claimed to be from Land of River and they were all civilians who got word of their clan being re-established in Konoha and decided to try their luck somewhere they could openly share their name without fear of being exploited. After an extensive attempt to make sure they were who they claimed, the 4 were pointed at the clan and fit in nicely. One of the women was a doctor, while the other 3 were Fuinjutsu masters who had posed as an artist, scribe, and forger while in Land of River. One escaped the destruction of Yuzu while on a trip to Suna as a tourist. The doctor's story was similar to Ise and Fuso's, and the other two had been on the mainland during the destruction and fled, spending the intermediate years trying to settle down in different minor countries, only to be forced to flee when their names were revealed. They made several attempts to enter Hai no Kuni, but their lack of papers prevented them from legally crossing the border. It wasn't until they met the other two women that they made it across with fake papers. Luckily, Fuso knew the three Fuinjutsu women on site, and Ise was familiar with the doctor's name, even though she was several years behind him in Yuzu's medical program. At the arrival of the women, Ise and Fuso no longer had to work odd, infrequent hours to make sure someone was home to take care of the adopted orphans. The second floor of the house was entirely dedicated to Fuinjutsu. Now able to practice their preferred trade, the three women started a business of sorts from the sale of customizable explosive and storage seals to shinobi. They also sold security and barrier seals to shinobi and clan households. When Uzushiogakure was destroyed, the market for seals in Konoha had collapsed and prices for explosive seals had skyrocketed. Several groups had tried to fill the void, but the Fuinjutsu knowledge had been all but lost. The three masters slowly started to ease into the devastated market and lowered the prices, creating a promising future for it. Depending on how many of the civilian children chose to join in the effort, the clan would never be in want of money. Several individuals already approached the clan to ask for apprenticeships, but the women hadn't been satisfied with any of the candidates and refused. A few months after they arrived, a man, seriously injured and claiming to be an Uzumaki, had approached the Konoha border from Unokuni. He was brought to Konoha and his identity was verified, even though none of the established Uzumaki recognized him. Before Yuzu was destroyed, he was one of the village's merchants, and at the destruction, he lost the entirety of his livelihood, as well as his wife and infant son who remained in the village. After a few failed attempts to restart his business, he apprenticed to a samurai, who threw the man out when he got word that the Uzumaki clan was aligning themselves with Konoha and the man refused to give up his clan name. On the slim chance one of the surviving children was his son, he cut through a territory that was being fought over by two groups of criminals. He barely made it to the border before he collapsed, and had a variety of impressive scars after he recovered. Once he established himself as a member of the clan and somewhat recovered from the disappointment of his family still being dead, he was given the responsibility of everything else, which included fixing up and maintaining the house and property as well as acting as a salesman and advisor for the budding Fuinjutsu business. It didn't take long for the kids to start calling him Ji-chan. Since his arrival made the clan large enough to earn representation in the Council of Clans and the rest of the clans wouldn't take no for an answer, he had drawn the short straw and become the clan's representative. He was good at his jobs, even if he made a show of hating the other uppity representatives and the incessant teasing from the other adults, of which he was the youngest, excluding Kushina and me, who were only considered adults because of our shinobi status. As the highest-ranked shinobi, I was still recognized as the default clan head under Konoha law. Nagato noted that one of the only good things about me going MIA for so long was that as clan head I was technically the legal guardian of the orphan children and Kushina. Of everyone in the clan, I was the only one with enough public standing to handle the bundle of attempts by other clans and families to incorporate Uzumaki blood into their lines. One of my first jobs back would be to accept, or preferably reject, the shinobi clans attempting to pull Kushina into their families and the civilian families attempting to either marry into the Uzumaki clan or pull members away from it. I was quite disgusted to hear that news, mostly because no one except Kushina was even 10 years old, though the oldest of the civilians would be 10 at the end of the month. The rest of the clan shared my sentiments. Nagato started telling me about how Minato and Kushina had been promoted to Chunin just after Kakashi was born when a loud angry knocking sounded from the front door. "It's one of the suitors trying to take one of the civilian kids," Nagato grumbled. "He came yesterday, but since it was during dinner we ignored them until they went away." Toussaint didn't want to risk a fight since Kushina and Minato weren't here and Ji-chan was at a meeting. "I guess I have to handle it," I sighed, standing up. "Do you have something I can wrap around my hands and forehead?" Nagato nodded and jumped up to pull out a roll of bandages from his dresser. I wrapped my forehead and the palms of my hands as I slid open the door and walked to the front of the house. When I glanced behind me, Nagato was following closely and Ise was quietly ushering everyone through the back door. As soon as they disappeared into one of the rooms, I opened the front door. Good afternoon, stranger-san. Is there an emergency that requires you to attempt to break down the door? I greeted politely. Who are you? The man demanded and took a step forward to enter the house, but I made no motion to move out of his way and allow him through. After a long moment of staring each other down, he returned to his position. He was dressed in traditional clothes and had a little boy and girl, twins, primped up to look thrice their age, hovered behind him, terrified. Generally, the visiting stranger introduces themselves first, I responded coolly. 3 men, apparently there to look intimidating, took a step up onto the porch, making the space seem more than a little crowded. Frankly, civilians, no matter how big and strong they looked, didn't scare me the slightest. Oshiro Riku, head of the Oshiro clan. My clan controls 70% of the spice trade in the Land of Fire, he responded pompously. It's a pleasure to meet you, Oshiro-san. I am Uzumaki Kichiro, and this is my little brother Nagato. I put an arm around Nagato's shoulders and pulled him partially into view, forcing him to hide the kunai in his hand, but not fast enough for the civilian not to notice. Suddenly, he was a bit less confident, though it was almost imperceptible. Is there a reason for your visit? I prompted when he tried to stare me down again. I knew he expected me to invite him inside and play host, but I knew better. May I speak with your clan head? That is me. Forgive me if I don't believe you, young man. I assure you, I am telling the truth. I am a Chunin shinobi of Kanagakure, as well as an Irionin and Jinchuriki. That makes me the senior shinobi of this clan, and with the main family deceased, I am, by default, the head. I'm also in the bingo books if you would like to verify my claims, though that entry might be slightly outdated. The man in front of me lost a lot of confidence at my closing statement. Uzumaki Kichiro was declared dead over a year ago, he drew himself up pompously. I was declared MIA, not Kia, but I can understand the confusion. With all due respect, I am fairly certain your visit isn't about the identity of my clan's leadership. You are correct. I came to discuss the engagement of one or both of my children to members of your clan. He bowed respectfully. After a brief moment of hesitation, I mimicked him and stepped aside so he could enter. Nagato took his cue and led them to the appropriate room once they had taken off their shoes and dusted the dirt from the road off their clothes. I made note of the fact that the roads were abnormally dry for the time of year. I closed the door behind everyone and followed them to a room with a table in the center and cushions arranged around it. I sat down opposite the Oshiro clan head. A man who appeared to be a lawyer sat down at the clan head's right and placed 4 scrolls on the table between us. The guards knelt in a line against the wall behind the clan head, and the children stood on either side, directly behind him. I'll get some tea, Nagato said and hurried out. It has come to my attention that you have several children in your clan at the perfect age for betrothal. As a new clan with such a young head, I can understand the difficulties in establishing yourself a political base of power. The door opened to reveal an unfamiliar red-headed man. He bowed politely to the room, closed the door behind him, and knelt beside me on my right while I carefully kept my eyes on the Oshiro head. I only looked away when he slid a piece of paper in front of me that briefly explained who he was and why he was here in a rushed script. The ink hadn't even had a chance to dry. It was nice to know his name was Takeshi since Nagato only referred to him as Ji-chan. I folded the page before the Oshiro's lawyer could read it upside down and retune my attention to the guests. As I was saying, I can understand the difficulties in establishing yourself a political base of power, especially as an active shinobi. I wish to help you in that. Before you continue, I would like to ask why it appears that I need help in these matters. He smiled widely. You see, your clan only recently entered Konoha politics, and are only just beginning to participate in the trade here. There are many pitfalls in the markets, and anyone can benefit from someone with experience. An alliance with my clan could only prove beneficial for you. As I'm sure you are aware, my clan is quite small, and the goods and services we have to offer this village reside firmly on the shinobi side of this economy, even though the clan is mostly civilian. Why do you suppose we need the help of another civilian clan who almost exclusively caters to civilians? To broaden your spheres of influence and provide your children with potential niches in the workforce. I glanced at Takeshi for guidance, and he motioned under the table for me to accept the explanation. Hypothetically, would this betrothal be an alliance between the clans or the absorption of one clan into the other? The door opened and Nagato came in with a tray of tea and placed it between us and served it with ease. In the distraction, the Oshiro's lawyer took one of the scrolls off the table. I almost missed the deft movement and tensed at the fact a civilian nearly pulled a fast one on me. Takeshi scribbled down a note in pencil that assured me neither the Oshiro or his men would not be able to cross the table without triggering the room's security. I read it and flipped the page over. The betrothal would be an alliance, he assured me once Nagato knelt with his back to the wall. So tell me, what can your clan offer that any other clan in this village, particularly one I am more familiar with, cannot? He immediately launched into a well-practiced spiel extolling the virtues of his clan. I listened with amusement and enjoyed my tea. I signed at Nagato to tap on the floor twice if he could understand the standard Konoha signs. When I heard the confirmation, I proceeded to mock the man through signs to amuse myself and assure Nagato I had no intention of following through with any agreements. Partway through, the stomach of one of the children, the girls, growled obnoxiously. Nagato, would you be so kind as to take Oshiro-san's children into the kitchen and find them something to eat? I figured it wouldn't be very polite of me to embarrass the father in front of his children. As soon as they left, Oshiro hurried and finished the speech, finally noticing that I was less than impressed by him. Before I could state my opinion on the matter, he launched into an extremely dehumanizing description of the two children, as if he was attempting to sell them to me like an animal. I might have been slightly overreacting, considering his behavior would have been considered perfectly normal to most anyone else, but I was certainly not going to deal with it any longer, damn the consequences. No, I interrupted him firmly. He glared at me in shock, as if I had just thrown my tea in his face, a motion I was honestly considering. I am not interested in trading children for money, prestige, or political power. If you are interested in allying our respective clans through marriage, your proposal will be considered when the parties affected by the agreement are of age and have initiated the conversation. I always wanted to throw someone out of a house, and I dearly hoped he was going to provoke me to the point where I would be justified in doing so. He smirked at me, which was not the response I was expecting. Let me rephrase, little boy. You are in no position to deny this settlement. With a somewhat evil smile, the lawyer spread out the scroll he had taken off the table earlier in front of me and pointed at a blank space on the scroll for my signature. The clan head unrolled a quill and ink jar above it. I'm afraid I don't see a reason why I'm compelled to sign this. I raised an eyebrow at them. Kichiro, Takeshi began grimly. I held up a hand to stop him. Oshiro-san, as I am sure you are aware, I am a shinobi. I have fought in this war and I have killed both in defense of myself and in defense of this village. I gave myself up to become Iwa's prisoner. I gave myself up to be tortured for several reasons, the foremost of which is the children of this village, the future of this village. Now, tell me why I should voluntarily betray the happiness of those I've sacrificed for. If it's money, forget it. The children of this clan will grow up reasonably well off, that I am certain of. If you think prestige can tempt me, you're forgetting the fact that the Uzumaki clan has their insignia on the back of nearly every shinobi in this village, even though they are an almost entirely civilian clan, and always have been. For that same reason, we have a disproportional effect in the political sphere as well. From my perspective, I have absolutely no incentive to agree to anything, especially after you attempted to rudely knock down the front door and proceeded to insult me by insinuating I was a liar, incompetent, and dead. He just glared as I rolled the scroll closed and tossed it at him. It bounced off his chest and landed in his hand. I stood up slowly and the rest of the room quickly stood in return as I leaked the tiniest amount of killing intent. Not even the Hokage could make me give up one of my family members, and I assure you, he's tried. Now leave. Please. I finished. They left in a hurry. A minute after the front door slammed, Ise appeared in the door. I'm going to make sure his children get home, Takeshi said and slipped past him. Minato and Kushina are taking them back, Ise said over his shoulder. Everyone is at the dinner table. No one's going to complain if I just accidentally started a feud with the Oshiro clan, right? Ise laughed. No, kiddo, we're not going to complain. No one else knows you're here yet, so why don't you stay here until I come and get you so you can make a big entrance? I rolled my eyes. If you say so. ISE closed the door behind him with a vindictive grin. Chapter 37. The entire Uzumaki clan plus Minato had just started a rather subdued dinner when I walked into the dining room. Fuso was the first to notice me, the first to squeal my name, as well as the first to assault me with a hug, even though she was very obviously pregnant and waddled more than she could walk. A heartbeat later, several more bodies slammed into me, knocking me back against the door frame. Underneath Fuso's elbow, I could see Nagato rolling on the floor, laughing, and substituted myself with him, so he could feel the full force of attack of the Uzumaki delight. The best part was that only Fuso had the perspective to notice the change in hairstyle and height, and laughed at the trick as I picked myself up off the floor. Only one of the Uzumaki kids, the oldest civilian, did not join the vertical dogpile, and I took my cushion off the shelf and parked it between him and ISE. Hey! Everyone! I'm absolutely starving here, so put poor Nagato, who was laughing at me and totally deserved what he got for being an ass in the first place, down and let's eat. They broke apart with a laugh and retook their places around the table. Minato and Kushina had identical glares on their faces, and I had a feeling I was going to get kidnapped as soon as I was finished eating, which was fine with me, because I would probably fall asleep as soon as the chattering eased. There were introductions between me and the adults, some polite conversation, but mostly everyone just talked at me or about me. As the last morsels of food were eaten, the puppies Nagato told me about rolled in for their meals. I grinned as they focused on me, took a few wary sniffs, gave the doggy equivalent of a shrug, and bounded for their respective owners. Minato and Kushina took the opportunity to grab me under the arms, Nagato tackled my legs, and I was painfully dragged to the top floor of the house via the spiral staircase Takeshi rebuilt after a jaunty wave to the adults. When we reached the top, Minato pried Nagato off my legs and Kushina threw me onto one of the mattresses that had a trap seal stitched into it so I couldn't leave it. Okay, I get the picture, you two are really unhappy with me right now, I get it, but before you murder me in some creative and painful way, can we talk about it? I'll tell you anything you want to know, damn the classified labels. They just glared at me without a reaction, and I rightly assumed they couldn't hear me. I laid back and got comfortable. I wasn't headed anywhere anytime soon anyways. Eventually, the seal fell after a three-way argument between Minato, Kushina, and Nagato that I couldn't hear. Nagato sat down beside me as I sat up and leaned against the wall while Minato and Kushina sat down in front of me before they reactivated the seal. You'll tell us everything, right? Nothing classified, no lies, no stretching the truth, just the bare facts, and you'll answer any questions honestly and completely, Minato demanded. I'll tell you anything you want to know with complete honesty from after I collapsed, sealing the seven swordsmen up until this second. That seemed to satisfy them for the moment. Nagato tucked his head under my chin and wrapped his arms around my torso. And so I told them everything that I remembered, the complete and honest truth, albeit a bit boring for most of the time. It was harder than I thought, and I had to stop myself several times before I glazed over parts of the story I would normally have filtered for retelling. I didn't have to tell them anything. I could have said I didn't remember anything, but I knew it wouldn't satisfy them. At least, even though I knew there were gaps in my memory, I couldn't place them, and what I did remember was reassuringly mundane compared to what they probably imagined. The worst part of it all was how much time had passed without me realizing it. It still felt like 5 months, even though over a year had passed. It would take me weeks to adjust to not only being older, but also the changes in the village I had already seen. I did not tell them about the conversation I overheard between the Hokage and Kagami. I told them how terrified I was to hold Kakashi, who was so small, and how scared I was that I would drop him. That distracted everyone for a while. Apparently, Kakashi was a frequent presence in the house, and according to the adults, he was small for his age. I clung as tightly to Nagato as he held onto me through the entire thing, but I didn't leave a tear stains on his clothes. When I finished, none of them could look me in the eye. How can you not hate them? Minato demanded. Hate whom? IWA. Can you honestly say you would have done differently in the same circumstances? I wouldn't have broken the treaty in the first place, Minato grumbled. Kushina interrupted before I could answer. I know how you like to flip the situation, to understand it from someone else's perspective, but it won't work this time, Nisan. IWA is firmly in the wrong no matter which direction you look at it. Damn, she grew up fast. You should at least be angry with them, Minato concluded. I sighed and rested my head on Nagato's, who started nodding off towards the end of my recollection. I don't want to argue with you. I don't trust IWA, but I don't hold any ill will towards them. Now, everyone here is exhausted. Don't argue with me, I can see the bags under your eyes, and I'm sure mine are worse. You three can stay here and talk about what you want to ask me in the morning. I'll go sleep in Nagato's room. I stated to stand up, but Nagato refused to let go. You're not going anywhere, you're not disappearing again. Nagato mumbled. I didn't. Oh, I guess you're right, I did disappear on you, Nagato. I'm sorry about that, but it won't happen again if I have anything to say about it. I don't even resume training for another 2 days, I promise. If you had anything to say about it, you wouldn't have left in the first place. I didn't have a response to that, so I just picked Nagato up with me. I will see you in the morning, I said to Minato and Kushina. Minato looked as if he wanted to say something, but a look from Kushina silenced him. I carried Nagato down the stairs and into his room without interruption. I laid Nagato on his bed and sat down beside him, leaning back against the bedpost. After a few moments, ISE paused on the threshold, several blankets tucked under his arm. I don't want to talk about anything right now, I told him flatly as Nagato's hand tightened in mine. I didn't expect you to. I only came to close the door and tell you that if you need to leave the house during the night you have to go through the smallest window on the northwest wall of the 3rd floor. I'll activate the security seals in a few minutes, and if you leave, you won't be able to get back in until sunrise when I take down the seals. I'll key you directly into the seal system tomorrow so you can enter any leave whenever you want. Thank you, but I'm sure it will help the peace of mind of several individuals if my movements are restricted until I return to active duty. Nagato's hand tightened in mine. Do you have any idea when that will be? I don't know the wartime procedures for someone in my position. You'd be better off asking Minato or Kushina. ISE placed the extra blankets on the foot of the bed. There's an empty room with a bed 2 doors down on your right if you want it, as well an extra mattress on the 2nd floor in the far corner of the room. Sleep where you like, everyone else has already gone to bed and no one will bother you. He started to close the door but stopped. And I'm here if you need anything, at any time, no matter how trivial, don't hesitate to ask. I'm in the first room on your right from the front door. I nodded and he shut the door. A few minutes later, I could feel the massive security seal activate. Can you stay here for tonight? Nagato asked softly. It took me a long time to decide on my answer, but eventually I lay down beside him and he slid towards the wall to give me more space. Straight face. I slept fitfully that night and Nagato shook me awake several times, but I never fully awoke. When morning came and I woke up, the first thing I did was panic at the unfamiliar room and took one of Nagato's training kunai before he could react to my sudden alertness. Without thinking, I stabbed my forearm with the blunt tip, the blade going between the bones of my arm and puncturing my thigh. Nagato let out an alarmed shout as I pulled the blade out of my arm, and almost immediately, I could hear several people running for the room. They opened the door just as Nagato managed to wrench the kunai out of my grasp. I probably looked possessed as I stared down, unsure how to feel. ISE stepped forward cautiously and sat down beside me. He automatically pulled the bandage off my head, ripped it in half, and folded it to make a pad to put pressure on the bleeding. Someone reached for my forehead and I automatically flinched away from the unfamiliar hand. Ki-chan, just give him some space, he'll be fine, Fuso murmured. Does he look anywhere near fine to you? That boy should be in the hospital. He would never have been released under my watch, no matter how badly the village needs him. Kid, now is not the time, Fuso said firmly. The other person in the doorway left quickly, pulling a stunned Nagato along with them. He's suicidal. Kid screeched back. He's 11 and impulsive, not suicidal. Are you blind? The boy has a hole in his arm from a training weapon. How else would you explain it? I'm not suicidal, I interrupted coldly. I only damaged the muscle, and that is easy to fix. I just panicked for a moment, but I'm fine now. You obviously have some kind of disconnect with reality then, and you should still be in the hospital sorting out your head, or with someone who can control you in case you lose touch. Damn it! I'm not crazy. I shot to my feet. ISE stood with me and grabbed my arm to keep me from lunging at her, not that it would have actually stopped me. You're not in your right mind. I damn straight know I'm not, but that doesn't mean I need to be thrown in the psych ward. I didn't mean that to come out as harsh and defensive as it sounded. My head pounded and I felt an intense need to get out of the small room. Excuse. Kichiro, wait. I paused as ISE turned me around to focus on him. Heal it, he ordered. Obediently, I laid my hand over my arm and closed up the skin before laying my hand over my thigh to heal the puncture wound. Is your chakra control normal? ISE asked, tapping my jaw to keep my eyes focused on him before I could turn away and push my way out. Fuso was trying to persuade Ki to leave, but she was having none of it. I frowned. Yes, but it feels a little different now that you brought it up. You just have more than you remember and it's a little less flexible. ISE put a hand on the top of my head and pressed his thumb against the center of my forehead. Focus on your chakra, just yours. Slowly, I sat back down on the bed, doing as I was told. He took one of my hands and pressed it over my heart. Feel your heartbeat and match your chakra to the rhythm. After a minute of concentration, my chakra started to pulse through my body alongside my blood and it was almost hypnotizing, but it didn't take very long for me to regain equilibrium and return to normal. When I reopened my eyes, ISE took a seat beside me and I leaned against him. Keed and Fuso had left. What's wrong with me? I groaned, rubbing my temples. Kichiro, calm down, ISE tried to soothe. I'm not worked up, I just know something is wrong, but it's not me but at the same time, it is me. He slid me into his lap and wrapped a blanket tightly around me. You're safe here, he assured me. Safe from myself? I asked sardonically, but that quickly turned into panic. I don't have the self-discipline needed to break my own skin. It took me over a year to get the discipline to break or dislocate bones in my hand, and that was only after endless exercising and escaping ropes and wires, but I was never able to. My breathing quickened to the point that I could no longer force the words out. Focus on me, Kichiro, ISE murmured and pressed my ear over his heart. The steady rhythm helped me focus, but not on him. Suddenly, ISE grabbed my jaw and forced me to look at him, holding the blanket closed tightly around my torso so I couldn't move my arms. Focus on me, Kichiro, he repeated. I squirmed, but unless I used chakra, he was stronger. Hatake trained you to defend yourself first and ask questions second, right? That has nothing. It has everything to do with this. Hatake would never have let you out in the field if the conditioning hadn't worked. No one would have let you out of the village otherwise. What are you talking about? I jerked backwards, hard enough to wrench the blanket free of ISE's grip, and landed flat on my back. You were trained to eliminate threats, whatever they may be. So what? ISE pinched the bridge of his nose as if I was missing an obvious point. You didn't even notice, did you? What are you talking about? I almost shouted at him. Whether you were aware of it or not, you were trained to react to and eliminate a threat before it could harm you. Tell me, what is the primary method Hatake taught you to dispel a genjutsu? I frowned. Since I'm a medic nin, the primary method is breaking or dislocating a finger since I can heal it almost right away. As much as you hate to admit it, Kichiro, you are conditioned to attack back. If someone took a knife to you in the middle of the street, they would have the knife in them instead. You want to think you back off and avoid confrontations, but you attack back because that is what you were trained to do. That's not right, I hissed. What could you possibly know? I watched your father and several others go through the exact same thing you are, ISE murmured back, his voice grave. I didn't respond, I just lay on the floor and rubbed my face. He spent 8 weeks in one of Kiri's torture chambers. They tried everything on him. He broke off and I could tell he was still grieving. I picked myself up off the floor and sat down beside him. It was probably cruel of me to show up in front of them and aim. I knew he had gotten his hopes up that both of Kichiro's parents were still alive, even though I had been quick to say otherwise. Your dad was as strong as he was smart. He held out for far longer than he should have been able to, or maybe they sent someone incompetent, but when he supposedly broke, he fed them false information. When they figured it out, someone else took over, and the rest of the time your father spent under countless genjutsus until he no longer knew what direction was up. The worst part, perhaps, was that no one was coming for him. Uzushiogakure didn't dare anger Kiri by attempting a rescue, so he had to escape on his own. He managed it and showed up at the village gates nearly dead. He all but retired from being a ninja after he recovered. He became a full-time village guard, only running the occasional C rank to escort merchants between Yuzu and Konoha. Did you know he was a jonin? He earned it at 16 and went nearly 10 years before he got caught and stopped taking A-rank missions. It wasn't until after you were born a year and a half after he escaped that he could return to duty without putting a kunai through anyone who stepped behind him. ISE painstakingly cleaned my blood out from around his fingernails with the clean part of the bandage, waiting for me to respond. When I said nothing, he continued. That's how I know, Kichiro. Your father accidentally injured several people before he figured out which triggers set him off, and I was there the entire time. He pressed a hand over his chest, where I vaguely remembered he had a scar. That's how I know. You can't help your training and it will take time for you to get better. I'm not sick, not this time. Kushina told me a lot about what you've done for her and Minato. It's time for us to help you. I shouldn't need. After being captured, there are very few ninjas who return to active duty. You know I don't have a choice, I responded. I walk out of this house as a medic and shinobi or a dead man, and I can't let them seal the Kyuubi into Kushina. ISE didn't refute it as he put his arm around my shoulders. If it's not sealed in her, it will be sealed in Nagato. He reflected on that until my stomach grumbled impatiently. Let's get you something to eat. Straight face. Breakfast was quiet. Nagato, Minato, and Kushina had been temporarily suspended from their respective responsibilities for a calculated prank they pulled on the academy the day before. I suspected the three of them had turned into little heathens while I was gone, so long as neither ISE nor Fuso were looking. The rest of the children had left for school while all the adults were working elsewhere. In the house, it was just the four of us. Kachan said that you should be retiring. Nagato broke the silence. He can't, Kushina responded before I could. I read the shinobi contract. There's a clause that says a shinobi can retire after any major hospitalization with no consequences. Nisan's contract is a bit different. I nodded in agreement before sticking the last of my rice in my mouth. I would have done almost anything for a good waffle slathered in maple syrup. Or scrambled eggs and bacon. Hell, any American food would have been fine, I just wanted something familiar. Are there any eggs? I asked, seemingly out of nowhere. I got odd looks from all three of them. You've eaten at least 2 kilograms of food already, Minato deadpanned. How are you not full? I shrugged. Frankly, I was stuffed, but by the time I finished cooking an omelet, I would have enough room. When I wasn't on a mission, I still ate in American proportions, even if it was almost pig-like in comparison to the rest of the culture. Besides, I needed the calories. I sure as hell didn't want to stunt my growth in this world. There might be 1 or 2 eggs in the kitchen, Minato said. I was on my feet immediately in search of them. They followed to clean up the dishes as I rustled around the kitchen looking for what I would need for a decent omelet. There was no cheese or peppers, so I made do with some spinach and onions. I was very proud of myself when I finished the omelet. Nisan? Kushina asked as I tipped the clumsy omelet onto a plate. What is that? An omelet, I responded cheerfully. Is it from IWA? No, but I'm going to say it's from America because I'm arrogant like that. I climbed up on top of the cupboard to retrieve the fork I had hidden when the kitchen had been finished. I carved it not long after I had arrived in Konoha when I had gotten sick of using chopsticks for every single meal. It was dusty, but I rinsed it in the sink and dug into my omelet while leaning against the kitchen sink, trying to ignore the incredulous looks the other three were giving me. Is there a problem? I asked them when I finished half the omelet. You're weird, Nagato summed up their thoughts. Would you like to try it? I asked, cutting off a piece and offering it to him. Tentatively, Nagato reached out and took the square inch of egg, spinach, and onion with his fingers. He eyed me with suspicion, but ate it anyways. It's not bad, he conceded, making a silent plea of more. I cut off 2 more pieces to offer to Minato and Kushina. It made what remained of the omelette depressingly small, but I was full this time. For some reason, Minato tossed a kunai across the room, and when I looked back at my plate, it was empty and Nagato had a very full mouth and my fork in his hand. I carefully set the plate in the sink while Nagato quickly swallowed the food. "It was a good dessert?" Nagato said bashfully when my gaze returned to him. "You, my youngest little brother, are not going to enjoy your training session today, mostly because you got caught." I poked Nagato in the chest. "The 2 of you, my oldest little siblings, are going to have it much worse because you stole my omelet." I patted Minato and Kushina's heads. All 3 of them paled, and I let them sweat it for a little longer before bursting out laughing. They laughed nervously. "Come on, I'm not going to waste my day training the 3 of you. What do you say to a walk instead?" I picked Nagato up and set him on my shoulders before throwing my arms around the shoulders of the other 2 and escorting them towards the door. "Wait!" Kushina cried and vanished up the stairs. After a few seconds, she returned with a ball I made during our first week in Konoha to entertain her when she got tired of wandering around the village with no money. We had played hacky sack games for hours inside or out in clearings beside different trails. I was surprised she kept the thing. It was just a makeshift cloth sack I had sewn from my torn shirt with a needle and thread Kushina begged off some lady. It was stuffed with the rest of the shirt and made a decent hacky sack. "Why don't we go out back and you can show Minato and Nagato all the fun games you made up?" I shrugged and agreed, turning around to exit the house through the back door. We played hacky sack for the remainder of the morning. Minato volunteered to go get lunch and bring it back. I made makeshift lacrosse sticks, and after lunch, I introduced the game to them. Their first attempts were hilarious, but Minato and Kushina were shinobi and Nagato was a genius, so it didn't take long to get a good game going after lunch. It didn't take long for us to realize that Nagato could somewhat defend against Minato and Kushina at full speed, even if he had a hard time tracking me when I poured on the speed. The game picked up a lot after that. I was thrilled to find out I was still faster than Kushina and Minato, as long as they didn't use any jutsu. I had to add a no chakra rule after a frustrated Minato sunshine passed Nagato and I to put the ball in our goal, which was a circle in the ground. We gained an audience when the rest of the kids returned home. Dinner was outside that night. The game ended at sunset, with Minato and Kushina 1 point ahead of Nagato and Nagato insisted it was a tie, since that point had been for Minato's shunshin. I just told him to deal with it and be proud that he kept up with 2 chunin in speed, if not in skill. Of the 12 points we had, Nagato had only scored 1. The 4 of us spent the remainder of the evening on the 3rd floor. At some point, a target was set up and we took turns riddling the target with senbon, kunai, and shuriken while the 3 of them pelted me with the questions they had refrained from the night before. I slept on my own mattress when they exhausted their questions. It did nothing for the difficulty I had sleeping and I nearly dislocated Minato's arm when he shook me awake in the morning. I talked with ISE for almost an hour that morning while the other 3 were sent around the village on errands. When he left for his shift at the hospital, Minato cornered me. "We were banned from civilian contact, Nissan. Why are you allowed to stay here with kids running all over the place?" I sighed. "I don't have any history of violent outbursts, Minato, and I'm not swinging at everything that startles me. Both you and Kushina were, and some of your attacks on me would have killed a civilian unable to counter them. It's just a difference in personality." "They almost did kill you," Minato looked down guiltily. "Those were extenuating circumstances," I insisted. He wasn't convinced, so I ruffled his hair reassuringly before giving him a hug. "I don't hold it against you, Minato, I'm perfectly fine now." He clearly didn't believe me anymore, but I couldn't do anything about that. Kushina appeared in front of me. I put 2 fingers against her forehead. "Wait your turn, I'm reassuring Minato right now." I pushed her away as she scowled, but she wandered off anyways. "You're not perfectly fine, Nissan," Minato responded quietly. I pulled back and held him at arm's length, both hands on his shoulders. "No, I'm not, but that has absolutely nothing to do with you, is that clear?" "Yes, my choices got you in your mess, but your choices have absolutely nothing to do with my mess." I should have. Should have what? Offered to go instead? Stopped me? Gone with me? The entire situation was beyond your control, and any situation like it will be beyond your control for a long time yet. You're not that much older than me. The situation was beyond my control as well. Hell, the Hokage himself could do barely anything about it. Then I'm going to become Hokage and make sure nothing bad ever happens to you or anyone else ever again. Minato, you can't control all of the bad in this world. You can become the most powerful, the fastest, the scariest, but bad things are still going to happen to everyone. You can't fix the world no matter how hard you try. Minato glared at me. You can't fix it, and I'm not idealistic enough to let you think you can. The only thing I can be sure of is that you can make this world better. How much better depends on you, how long you live, and how strong you can get. He still didn't like it, but I didn't care. I'm going to go see what Kushina wants, and then I have someone's office door to break down. Do you need anything else before I leave you to think on what I said? He shook his head, so I left him to think on what I said. What did you need? I asked when I nearly ran into Kushina as I walked out of the dining room. Minato cornered me in. It's nothing, she murmured. All right, I responded cheerfully. I'll be back in a few hours. Where are you going? To break down the Hokage's door. He really doesn't like it when people do that. Good, I'm trying to be obnoxious. Nisan, why do you try and antagonize the Hokage? He's not that bad. I smirked at her. You're right, he's not that bad. I won't break the door, promise. Your uniform is upstairs. Chapter 38. After changing into my uniform, minus my Haorian weapons, I took the route across the rooftops and landed in front of the Hokage Tower. No one stopped me as I strode inside and headed directly up to his office. I knew the answer I was going to give about route was flimsy, but I wanted to be sure to face the Hokage's interrogation on my terms instead of being caught unaware. I was about to open the door, but thought better of it and knocked instead. There was no need to be overly rude. Come in, the Hokage called. I opened the door. He glanced up at me and did a double take as if he was expecting someone else. Kichiro-kun, I wasn't expecting to see you this soon. I closed the door and took a seat in front of him, my arms crossed while he continued to write in a scroll. What can I do for you? I heard a significant part of your conversation with Kagami outside of my hospital room. He stiffened and slowly put down the pen and set aside the scroll. You should have still been unconscious. I honestly wish I was, but that can't be changed now. I believe you have questions for me. He studied me for a long time. You are in no condition for me to interrogate now, he concluded. The minute I'm healthy enough to be interrogated, you're most likely going to send me off to fight IWA as a medic instead. I can't do my job if you suspect me of treason. I'm here, ready to voluntarily answer your questions truthfully, and I am fully aware of where I am and what I am doing. This is the deal, take it or leave it. He continued to study me. I leaned back in my seat and stared at the ceiling above his head. Finally, he spoke. How much of the conversation did you hear? Enough to know that you believe Uchiha Madara-level Jinjutsu to be at play in this war. You are scared by the supposedly unintelligible memories and thoughts I have floating around my mind, and are extremely suspicious that I know sensitive information about this village and potentially shared it with IWA, because, honestly, who expects a kid to hold up for more than a few seconds under torture? Is that all you heard? He asked, cautious. Yes. He sighed. Would you like some tea before we begin? No thank you. He made a gesture with his hand and two ANBU appeared beside me, kneeling. No one except Uchiha Kagami is to enter my office until Kichiro-kun leaves. Dismissed. The ANBU vanished. The Sandaime stood and disappeared briefly into an adjacent room before returning with a teapot, 2 teacups, and tea leaves in a separate cup. You're not one to be impressed by formalities, so I'm not even going to try. He poured the tea and handed me some. I took it but didn't drink any, slowly swirling it in the cup. If you were anyone else, I would have returned you to the hospital for showing up here before you recovered. It wasn't a question, so I didn't respond. He turned my chair so that he could face me directly from the second chair in front of his desk and sat down. A lot of things about you and Kushina-chan don't quite add up. Leave Kushina out of this. She has no responsibility for anything you could possibly want to know. Then tell me how two children managed to nearly master Fuinjutsu between them and teach it to another child with no one having any inclination of what was going on? I bit my lip thinking of the best way to phrase my answer. Am I correct in concluding you stole much more than clan records before the massacre? Yes. How much information did you manage to take? I'm pretty sure it was the entire library. He managed a rather spectacular spit take. Just to be clear, you managed to save almost the entirety of the Uzumaki records and Fuinjutsu, and told no one. I'm pretty sure Minato knows, and Kushina might have told the rest of the clan, but otherwise, that is correct. And no one caught onto your scheme? Not that I'm aware. That's quite the accomplishment to pull off in a shinobi village. I should court-martial both of you for it. I sat up straight, glaring at him. As I said, the entire thing was my idea. Leave Kushina out of it. I don't believe you would condone a stunt of that magnitude in the first place, though hiding the fact that you had the information I'm certain was entirely your idea. The theft of the information had absolutely nothing to do with you or Konoha, and the deception began before Kushina and I arrived here. None of it can be blamed on her since her contract had no requirement to release information from before her arrival. Calm down, I'm not going to punish either of you. You've more than made up for withholding the information, though I recommend you share it with your clan. A living Uzumaki clan with secret techniques they can use is much more valuable to Konoha than a bunch of paper with potentially indecipherable scribbles. I relaxed back against the back of the chair. Next question, how did you know Mito-sama and I were planning on placing the QB into either you or Kushina? I knew it was an eventual possibility, but that was all. How did you know about the QB in the first place? The fight between the Shodai and Uchiha Madara is nearly common knowledge. How did you know about the Uzumaki affinity for containing tailed beasts? There was a significant section of the Uzumaki records focused on sealing tailed beasts. Much of it was dated before the Shodai distributed the tailed beasts to the other shinobi nations. One of the required attributes for Jinchuriki is lots of dense chakra. There were also several notes that mentioned Uzumaki Mito had a significantly easier time controlling the QB in comparison to the Jinchuriki of lesser-tailed beasts, even those around the same age and caliber as her. It wasn't a difficult conclusion to arrive at. Was Kushina's potential as a kunoichi the primary reason you pursued the Kumo kidnappers? The primary reason I pursued them was because she is my sister, but yes, I was aware of her potential. It was why I immediately began pursuit, so I could shift the attention off her and onto myself. That was stretching it a bit, but whatever worked. You put some thought into it. Is that why you made some of the outrageous statements you did? In order to make me focus on you instead of her? No, I made the statements because they needed to be made. Why didn't you kill the Uzumaki Fuso, Ise, and Nagato when you first saw them? I'm not going to kill someone who doesn't try and kill me first. They approached me as an old friend and family member. I wasn't going to kill them for it. What made you think that Nagato has a dormant Rinnegan as opposed to a different, unknown dojutsu, or a mutated version of the Sharingan or Byakugan? I've healed shinobi with both the Sharingan and Byakugan, as well as children with a dormant version of the Sharingan. The Sharingan is the important thing right now. I've healed people with almost every stage of the Sharingan, and as it advances it follows a distinctive pattern. From what I can tell, there are 4 stages that have been publicly confirmed, and I'm almost certain of another 2 stages beyond that. Explain those stages. The first stage is dormant. The Uchiha can't access any of the power, but there are several seeming erroneous or redundant nerves that seem to be just waiting for the right stimulus to activate. The next stages are the 3 tomo. When each tomo is gained, more nerves are formed in the eye, making it increasingly sensitive whenever chakra is channeled there. I think there is slightly less chakra required to use the Sharingan at each of these stages, but that's irrelevant. In each transition, the number of nerves doubles. There's a lot more that goes on, but if I go by the number of nerves, Nagato's eyes are the 7th stage of the Sharingan. The problem is that it's not the Sharingan anymore. There's clearly Uchiha DNA in the eye, but there's someone else's DNA as well. I can't read it very clearly with just chakra, but the person closest to it that I've healed is Tsunade's little brother, Nawaki, but it's only a passing resemblance, Senju DNA with a huge twist in it. There's this old story in the Uzumaki archives about the Sage of Six Paths and how his sons were the founders of the Senju and Uchiha clans, and well, if you look at it from a hereditary perspective, it looks like both sons were born with only part of the Sage's genetic code for the Rinnegan, so neither manifested it. Put them back together and bam! The Rinnegan is back. The Hokage's face was completely blank by the time I finished. It's a bit of a stretch, but it makes sense, I insisted. A stretch you made from an old myth, Kichiro-kun, he reprimanded. I stuck my tongue out at him. Every story, no matter how crazy, has a grain of truth in it somewhere. Unless you can offer something equally plausible, my theory is the only one out there and you can only disprove it if Nagato manifests an entirely different dojutsu. Question: have you told Nagato or his parents about any of this? I assumed they were already aware. Do you honestly believe they would let some stranger replace Nagato's eyes? They don't know about it, but I'll tell them later today. No, you will not tell them anything. Moving on to my next question. How did you know about Danzo's organization? I didn't. I beg your pardon? I had no idea that whatever the hell he had existed in the first place. So you're saying you made an accusation against an elder of this village with no basis whatsoever in fact, and it just happened to be true. He wasn't buying it. I've watched you say things you don't believe in, boy, and that statement had too much conviction. I scrambled for an acceptable answer. Fine. I meant it in an entirely different context. Every major shinobi in this village has a base of loyalty among the shinobi and civilians. Individuals that would support them over you in the case of a coup. I was bullshitting so hard, but it technically wasn't a lie. As far as I can tell, the base of power between you and Danzo is almost perfectly equal. The only difference between you is your perspective. Because Danzo still openly supports you, the point is moot. From my perspective, Danzo was trying to imply that you answered to him, which entirely turned the tables. The difference between you and Danzo, at least the difference I care about, is that I can persuade you to change your mind, or at the very least make you listen to my point of view. Danzo would smack me down the second I disagreed with him if he had the authority. I didn't think he actually commanded ninja that operated independently of you. At least, I didn't expect it until after this war is over and your pet policies begin to take effect. He wasn't satisfied with my answer, but he accepted it. That's an interesting perspective. I'm an interesting person. I rolled my eyes, but inside I let out a mental sigh of relief that my BS was accepted. What do you know of Uchiha Madara? The crazy co-founder of Konoha? I know enough about him that I don't want to be caught anywhere near him. I have a theory that he is still alive, but it doesn't have any proof. If I didn't have the Sandame's full attention, I had it now. Why do you think that? I shrugged. Because it supports my theory on what would have happened if the Kyuubi had been sealed in Kushina instead. He gave me an odd look. What? I swear it's legit. And would have happened if I wasn't there to screw things up. I just want to hear why you think Uchiha Madara is still alive. The bad guy never dies, and Uchiha Madara being alive would be one of the worst things that could happen to Konoha considering the Shodai is dead, you know, Murphy's Law and all that. If you ask me whose eyes Nagato has in his head, my guess would be that they are Madara's. There aren't any other Uchiha with Sharingan that could be advanced enough, and none of them have been buried without their eyes in recent years. Murphy's Law? I almost laughed at his strange pronunciation. Almost. Yeah, it states that anything that can go wrong, will go wrong. I probably sounded like I was spouting nonsense, but the Hokage parsed through it well enough. Do you honestly think Madara is still alive? Yes, I answered truthfully. Do you think he had anything to do with the Jinjutsus placed on you? I don't know. I've never knowingly been under a Jinjutsu strengthened by the Sharingan. What do you think? I asked the Kyuubi. He just growled and ignored me. I flinched as the Hokage snapped his fingers in front of my face. Kichiro-kun, I need you here right now, not lost in whatever you're thinking about. I'm listening. I slapped his hand away, or tried to. He pulled back before I could hit him. No, you weren't. I asked you the same question 3 times and you didn't react. A lapse like that could leave you dead or worse. Well, that wasn't good. I didn't even realize I had spaced out. What was the question? When the Yamanaka looked into your head, your memories for your first year and a half in Konoha were almost entirely indecipherable. Do you have any explanation as to why? I thought for a while before coming up with a plausible explanation, being that for most of that time I continued to think and process things in English. It wasn't until several months before I took the Genin test that I truly mastered Japanese for myself, not by borrowing the original Kichiro's knowledge. It still didn't explain how nearly everything could be indecipherable. I have a possible explanation, but what part was indecipherable? I can remember it all just fine. I'm almost certain a Jinjutsu can't alter something that happened that long ago, unless there was something specific they were after, but that doesn't account for the widespread effect. The only thing the Yamanaka could retrieve were 3 images. He wasn't telling the entire truth. With extremely deliberate movements, the Sandaime stood and picked up a slim folder from his desk. He pulled out the first one and handed it to me while I set the teacup on his desk. Can you identify these people? I looked down at the page in my hand as the Hokage retook his seat. It was the picture of my army buddies, taken on the last day of basic training. I wasn't completely taken by surprise that it came up. I was constantly drawing parallels between Sakumo's training and basic training for the U.S. Army. I had no idea what the other 2 images could have been. This image makes little sense, but the Yamanaka drew it as close as he could. The Hokage placed the next image on top of the first. It was a sketch of an ultrasound of a baby about to be born. I recognized it immediately. At the top of the picture was my former last name, Jordan-san, if I had any doubts. I sat stiffly ing down at the picture, glad that my bangs were long enough to hide my face. This last image appeared the most frequently. He held it up in such a way that would force me to look up so he could see my reaction. I didn't move. I was fairly certain of what the last image was. I brushed the face of the infant in the ultrasound. The baby girl's heart had stopped shortly after her mother's. I had gone to the hospital that morning with a wife and a child ready to be born, and went home with 2 coffins that afternoon. I never understood, nor did I care about what had went wrong. They were just gone. Kichiro-kun? After a moment, during which the Hokage waited for my response, the door opened. I stood up sharply, the papers falling to the floor, and marched towards the door. The Hokage grabbed my arm, but I twisted and struck the underside of his wrist as hard as I could, jerking free in the moment his grip loosened. "Stop!" he ordered sharply. I ignored him, my vision blurred by tears, and started to make a hand seal to Shunshin out of the office. Someone else grabbed my wrist and twisted my right arm behind my back while sweeping my feet out from underneath me, one of the very few non-lethal Uchiha takedown moves. I countered automatically, attaching my disabled arm to the back of my vest with chakra and throwing my entire weight onto the assailant's grip, pulling him slightly off balance. I used the assailant as leverage to twist and swing my free arm into his elbow. The strike connected and I could feel the bones begin to crack under the strength of the strike, before his other hand grabbed my wrist and redirected it. By that time, I had already untwisted the arm behind my back and had both of my arms crossed in front of me, while still falling backwards. I attached the bottom of my feet to the straps of his right sandal and used all my strength to pull my hands to my feet. They figured out what I was trying to do before I could finish the movement and knock him off balance. They released my hands and pulled up their leg, sending my head flying towards the ground. I tried to twist to avoid the concussion, but I was falling too quickly. By the time I finished blinking, I was on the floor as if the maneuver had succeeded originally, surprisingly not concussed. I started to twist out of the hold, but was released. Before I could react, a needle was stabbed into my thigh. I felt the drug entering the muscle and twisted, tearing it out of my leg and grabbing the hand that held it, shattering the object with a burst of chakra. "What did you give him?" the Hokage demanded as I clamped my hand over my leg and tried to neutralize it. "It's just a paralysis." With how much I gave him, he should be unconscious in a few seconds, Kagami answered as he pulled my hand away from my leg, causing me to lose control of the healing chakra. "He's still a child. A paralysis that powerful could kill him." "It won't, there was barely enough in there to kill someone his age, and he has the QB on his side. He might not remember most of this morning, but he'll be fine by tomorrow." Someone crouched and peeled open my eyelid. I tried to look around, but even the muscles of my eyes had been paralyzed. I could barely make out Kagami above me before he gently closed my eyelids. He was lying to the sandame. He wanted me to hear what was going on. He's unconscious. I suppose that altercation answers the question of whether or not his skill slipped. Kid actually managed to hit me, and I had my Sharingan on and everything. I was most certainly not unconscious. I was dizzy, but not unconscious. Shut up, Kagami. Good idea. Shut up so I could concentrate on trying to get rid of it, not that I could do jack shit with my hands on either side of me, open. I might have been able to heal if my hands were in a fist, but I needed to touch the injury to heal it, and for contaminants in the bloodstream, I needed to be within an inch or two of a major vein or artery, preferably with a hand over the heart of the victim. Come on, that's an impressive accomplishment for a full-grown jonin, much less an 11-year-old medic who should be relaxing at home. Give him some credit. Kagami. Fine, I'll get to the point. How the hell did you upset the boy this time? Also, why is he here? Where's Sakumo? And why did you change the time you were supposed to meet with him? The boy came to me. Did you at least get your questions answered before you upset him? Some of them. He and his sister have a scroll with pretty much the entirety of the Uzumaki library sealed in it. It explains a lot of the strange things coming out of his mouth. We assumed Hatake had just been boasting about the boy's intelligence, but I no longer believe he was exaggerating. The boy thinks on an adult level. Probably because I actually was an adult, even if childhood hormones sometimes messed with my judgment and made me much more impulsive and antagonistic than I would normally be. That doesn't answer how you upset him. I think it has something to do with that damnable code he writes in. Meaning? These were the only 3 images the Yamanaka could recover from the memories that are corrupted. On the clothes of these people, in the corner of this image, and on the collarbone of this woman, are all text in that code. The middle image, what is it? I don't know, but he touched the picture here as if it meant something to him. It's a child, an infant, Kagami concluded with certainty after a long pause. If I had to guess, I would say this is a picture of a child in the womb. The woman has the same text on her collar as in the corner of the picture. They're connected. They might be the same person, but she's clearly an adult. No, they're 2 separate people, most likely mother and child. It could be Kushina-chan and her mother, but the woman has no physical resemblance to Kichiro-kun or Kushina-chan. It must be someone else. The boy worked in the maternity ward of the hospital for some time. Could it be someone he treated? No, I already checked with the people he worked under at the hospital. None of them recognize the woman. She's definitely not ANBU or connected to it in any way. Speaking of ANBU, are you still considering officially keeping him in the program? Yes, I see no reason to anger Tsunade any further, and too many ANBU have been forced to return to regular duty injured because there isn't a medic that can treat them properly. Most of the organization is already familiar with him, so the transition shouldn't be a problem. Putting him with ANBU will place him in proximity to the 2 IWA Jinchuriki and the child from Kumo. Are you sure you want them all in the same place? He is in the IWA bingo books as an S-rank threat, and we know he was in contact with both IWA Jinchuriki while there, somehow getting close enough to them that they brought him back here. I don't understand what or how he did it. Either way, he's our best shot at controlling the Jinchuriki, and possibly containing the tailed beasts without resorting to the Shiki Fujin, even if he needs the help of his clan. We'll keep them separated as much as possible. The other countries won't like it if they find out the IWA Jinchuriki came here. Suna and Kiri are in no shape to rebuild a military. Kumo wouldn't dare turn against us, not while their Jinchuriki is still fixated on Kichiro-kun and we hold 4 of the Biju. Our only worry is IWA, and I don't think we can salvage the situation anyways. Anoki might come around. Not after this. What are you doing here so soon? I like to be early. Liar. Spoil sport. Either way, the Gobi Jinchuriki is not liking his accommodations with the Yanbi Jinchuriki downstairs. Both still refuse to give their names or cooperate until they speak with Kichiro-kun. Indisposed isn't going to last much longer as an excuse. Both Jinchuriki are still showing the effects of Jinjutsu manipulation, but not like what was put on our problematic little redhead. There is evidence on the Nibi Jinchuriki of the same, though not nearly as strong. Good call in checking the rest as well. IWA is most likely not responsible. Yes, how much do you know about the Sharingan? Quite a bit. Why? Kichiro claims that beyond the 3 Tomo, there are 2 more natural stages of the Sharingan. Where did he hear this? Kagami snapped defensively. He also claims that the Rinnegan can be gained if Uchiha DNA is combined with Senju DNA. There are 2 more stages, you know this, but only an old story supports that last claim, and the clan is of the opinion that the story is implausible. Is it? I'll take the pictures to Sakumo and see if he knows what's so important about them. He knows Kichiro-kun the best. For the time being, I think you need to back off the boy. Ask your questions and convey orders through messages or intermediaries. Every time you meet, he ends up worse for wear and with the worst luck in the village. It's not my. No, it's not always your fault. Sometimes circumstances force your hand, but he is an 11-year-old boy under the scrutiny of the 5 major villages. You're the common denominator in it all. Stop wondering why the boy hates you. Consider yourself on take care of Kichiro-kun duty, the Hokage muttered sourly. A paper crumpled and a second later Kagami picked me up off the ground. I know this war is stressful for you Hiruzen, but this immaturity needs to stop. Find a hobby, or get a punching bag that is not Kichiro or something. You are the Hokage and this is insulting to both the village and your predecessors. Kagami opened the door and slammed it shut before a retort could be made. Come on, kid, you should be moving around soon, he grumbled at me before shining out of the tower. Chapter 39. We have a guest, Rei. Kagami called into a house. Bring him into the main room. A second voice, which I recognized as his wife, hollered back. A few seconds later he laid me on a couch. There was a yelp from the door a moment later. Kagami! She scolded. Bringing back Sakumo-kun unconscious is one thing, but his student is quite another. Could you not say that like we have an affair? Everyone except Hiruzen-sama and Sakumo-kun is out of the village, and you're not getting along with the former at the moment. Also, you spend more time with little Sakumo-kun than you do with me. It bloody well looks like you're having an affair. But Sakumo has a baby. You have Yasu. Yasu is on a mission. I'll show you what I think of. Innocent kid in the house. No maiming. He's a medic, maybe he'll fix you up after I'm through with you. There was a crack. Ah hell, what is it with the elbow today? Does it have a hit me sign or something? Kagami whined. Yes, she deadpanned. Shit, who put that there? Better yet, how? Sakumo dropped by this morning. Maybe now that Kichiro-kun is back to babysit Kakashi-chan he can take a few missions before he goes crazy at being bottled up inside the village. I am perfectly capable, you are perfectly capable of watching Kakashi so Sakumo can take a mission. Yes, but one of the draws of teaching an apprentice with a different specialization is the free childcare, which you never got because you turned Sakumo into your miniature copy. He's got his own specialties. I wasn't aware that his saber and your tanto were so different. They are. Their katas are. You've been messing with me this entire time, haven't you? Yep. Well, Sakumo should be dropping by sometime in the next hour. Think you can fix Kichiro? He's not a toy, Kagami. But he has those twiggy arms and legs like those dolls Yasu used to play with. I'm about to sell you to a fangirl. Please! Anything but the fangirls. What do you want? I'll give you my firstborn. Wait, I already did that. I'll give you Sakumo's firstborn. Kagami sobbed theatrically. My dear Rei, I love you more than words can express. I'll be your slave for life. Wait, I'm already your slave. I'll make Sakumo your slave for life. She snickered. You should really stop selling your student. He doesn't mind. Seriously, don't sell me to those fangirls again. That was over 30 years ago, Kagami, and we weren't even married. You are a full-grown jonin, get over it. My dear Rei, you know nothing of the horrors of obsessive females. Your beauty is more lasting and more thorough than. Shut up. So harsh. Children are not to be objectified or sold into slavery. Sakumo's a big bad jonin and he has a kid of his own. He doesn't count. I'll buy that when you stop treating him like he's 8. I do not. Sakumo's here to confirm it. A second later, someone knocked on the door. Come in. I need your baby. Kagami called towards the door. After a minute, a set of footsteps entered the room. What do you want Kakashi for? Sakumo asked warily. Rei-chan wants a baby and I'm not going to risk castration again for knocking her up. A disgusting crack and a dull thud followed that statement. Think he's out? Sakumo asked. He knows better than to get up. Then I suppose you can answer this. Why is Kichiro unconscious on your couch? I'm not rightly sure, but you might want to stick around until he wakes up or Kagami might try and sell him to see how much the fangirls are willing to pay. A pained protest answered that, followed by another thud. Here, take Kakashi for a moment. The second I assumed Kakashi left Sakumo's arms, he started screaming as if he was in agony. While Rei tried to calm him, Sakumo rolled me onto my back and pressed my right hand against my chest. Kakashi quieted slightly and Sakumo took some brief idles. The second he was done he retook Kakashi, who automatically stopped screaming. Kichiro will be fine. As soon as he can, he'll start purging whatever drug is in him. Kakashi is the primary reason I'm here early. He won't let me put him down. Every time I let go of him, he starts screaming until I pick him back up. Earlier, he was in a dead sleep, I swear, he was so fast asleep his chakra was almost perfectly still. I put him down so I could get some rest and in a second he's awake and screaming his head off. Rei snorted. I think you're just exaggerating. I left him in his nursery because you said to make him sleep alone, but he just kept screaming. I left him in there for 10 minutes and he barely took a breath, I swear. That's odd, Rei commented. He's just giving you hell, Sakumo, that's what babies do, Kagami groaned. Yasu used to throw a Kage-level fit whenever Rei or I had to leave for a mission out of the village. Yasu was 3 years old when that started. Kakashi isn't even 2 months old yet. Rei snapped back. Is he sick? Not that I can tell. I was going to ask Kichiro but someone drugged him, Sakumo growled pointedly. He could be a genius with a sense of humor, Kagami suggested. He's not a genius, I already tested that theory. He's just more alert than a normal kid. Or he could be off the charts and messing with the test. I prefer not to think about how good of a shinobi my kid could make until he can stay awake for more than an hour or two at a time. At least the day was turning out alright for me. Kakashi had taken my words to heart and was in the process of torturing his father. I totally did not feel bad about abusing Sakumo through an infant. I finally started to regain control over my chakra and was metabolizing the paralytic as fast as I could. Thank goodness it only seemed to affect skeletal muscle, otherwise I would probably have been dead. I made a mental note to learn to use medical ninjutsu with different parts of my body, mostly so I wouldn't be caught for long in case a real enemy decided I needed drugs or poisons pumped into my system and my hands were busy elsewhere. I made a second note to figure out how to throw jutsu with my feet as well. Rei started asking the standard mindless "how's the baby" questions. I ignored it in favor of concentrating. The paralytic stuck in my muscles, making them heavy and slow, side effects I couldn't do anything about, but 10 minutes later, I was able to sit up. Since then, the conversation had moved into the kitchen so Kagami could tend to his split lip and bloody nose. I stood up without much of a problem. Walking was a bit of a challenge, but I made it to the door of the kitchen, staggering like a drunk. Kagami, you are now on my shit list, I announced. It came out slurred, but intelligible. And you look like you've been drinking, Kagami retorted. Sakumo, have you taught your cute little student anything? Sensei, I am going to thrash you 8 ways to Sunday. Outside, now. It's gonna be a few years before you're good enough to do that, Sakumo-chan. A low growling sounded from Sakumo's throat. I'm always up for kicking your ass. Without another word, Sakumo grabbed me with his free arm and hauled me out onto the back porch and dropped me on one of the chairs. Kakashi landed in my lap, grinning, while Kagami and Sakumo faced off in the backyard. Kakashi fell asleep quickly, without any fussing, and it took all my concentration to keep my head up. The problem with speeding up my metabolism to break down the paralytic or any other drug or poison was that it took a lot of energy, leaving me starving and barely able to keep my eyes open once I regained full control of my body. My limbs still felt heavy and numb, but I was inclined to think it was simply exhaustion. Eventually, I lay down on the bench, Kakashi's reassuring warmth snuggled against my chest, one hand gripping my hair tightly while the tiny nails of his other hand pricked at the skin of my wrist. I might have drifted off for a few moments, but woke when Sakumo yelped. The match had ended with Sakumo prostrate on the ground, Kageme's tanto pricking the base of his skull. Kageme's elbow ended up completely broken, but he still clearly won. I had no desire to even twitch. Even though the wooden bench was uncomfortably hard, the idea of moving was extremely distasteful. I still don't know how you managed to dislocate both of my arms, Sakumo grumbled. Your old sensei still has some tricks, even though I'm getting old. Sakumo muttered an unintelligible response under his breath. I flinched away as he laid a hand on my forehead, but didn't protest. I had gotten used to being touched and treated like a kid a long time ago. Even if it felt patronizing at times, it was a kind of security and reassurance I never had before I ended up in the Naruto world. Take him home, Sakumo. Don't bother bringing him to the Hokage tomorrow, just take him straight to headquarters. You can drop Kakashi off here. Explain everything to Kichiro-kun, then get going, both of you need your rest. I'm going to go see my own medic about this damn arm. Sakumo affirmed with a grunt and gently extracted Kakashi without waking him. Once the infant was settled in the crook of his right arm, Sakumo pulled me upright. Besides your family and a handful of others, no one knows where you went or even that you're actually back. That march into the Hokage's office was hidden by your ANBU guards. You're going to stay hidden, most likely until the end of the war. In order for your skill not to go to waste, you'll be operating inside of ANBU as a medic. Unless things get much worse, you won't be leaving the village. One medic for all of ANBU is enough, so you won't be too busy. Missions? That decision hasn't been made. How well you do during initiation will determine how many missions you might take. I sat up, more awake as a thought crossed my mind. ANBU take. Assassination missions. Look at me, Kichiro, Sakumo responded seriously. I took a deep breath and met his eye on the non-combat roster. Even if you shatter every single ANBU record, you're not going to be put on combat or assassination missions, trust me. The Hokage, his advisors, and the ANBU general are fully aware of how much you've already sacrificed, and they're not going to force you into combat until you are truly ready for it. It's just healing? You might still be training under me, but yes, the only work you'll be doing is healing. What about the hospital? They've been operating without you for almost 3 years now. You won't be working there. And my clearance level? You still have access to almost everything, which you'll need to create medical files for most ANBU. I don't want. We're not having this conversation. The decision has already been made. Do you have any questions about your immediate responsibility? Will I be working under you or someone else? Since there are no medics in ANBU, you'll be working directly under the ANBU general. Do I have to wear a mask? As long as you are within headquarters, no. It's one of the reasons why ANBU are never seen inside of the hospital. Besides, it's unsettling to be at the mercy of an impersonal mask, especially while vulnerable. Any other questions? Why can't I work in the hospital and treat ANBU alongside everyone else, maybe in a separate room or something? It was unilateral action by the Hokage that placed you in ANBU to begin with. The general didn't like it. If it wasn't for the fact that his men, and women, are dying because of their lack of reliable medical care, you would be working in the hospital as a regular medic, and a falsified stint in ANBU to get you out of the spotlight would have been the explanation for your absence. That still doesn't answer. Even though you don't remember it, IWA tortured you. You didn't give IWA any information about Konoha or Yuzu. It may have been primarily because of a seal, but through the entire ordeal, you kept your sanity. The general knows that, and he would be a fool to not take advantage of the ways ANBU would benefit if you became an active agent in a few years. I didn't even know. Every ANBU is tested to their limits in every branch of the shinobi arts, obviously, but they're not just tested on what they can do, their beliefs, resolve, and every other aspect that makes them who they are is tested as well to determine what missions they are sent on. ANBU has a 72% operative return rate compared to the rest of the force's 92%. Exactly 10% of missions are suicide missions, and 13% result in the capture of operatives who very rarely are recovered. Those are the peacetime statistics. Wartime is much worse. The fact that you managed to stand your ground as well as escape, no matter how roundabout it was, means you have bragging rights only one other living person who was or is a part of ANBU has. Considering you're a medic and have a working knowledge or mastery of all taijutsu forms and weaponry used in ANBU. You manipulative, I snapped, but Sakumo cut me off as if I never spoke. In a few years, you could be a perfect emergency replacement for any team. You intended to bring me into ANBU from the beginning, didn't you? It was more of a statement than a question, but Sakumo still flinched at the accusation. No, Sakumo snapped coldly. I intended for you to take the traditional route to Jonin and stay there. I made Jonin when I was 14 and ever since have had a foot in both the regular Shinobi Corps and ANBU because of who I was associated with. It's a stressful position and I never intended to let you in it, which is why I only taught you the basics in stealth, so you wouldn't be picked up during the ANBU scouting. Obviously, it didn't work. I relaxed back against the bench. Even if the other factors weren't in play, you still wouldn't be taking missions. Your fighting skills are nowhere near where they should be for ANBU, and your unwillingness to kill unless you have no other choice is something that would have made sure you never made it into ANBU, which is another reason I never addressed it beyond making sure you wouldn't die. ANBU only takes the strongest of shinobi, no matter what their age is. There are specializations, yes, but every ANBU is on par with the average jonin. So I'm stuck showing up at headquarters every morning to train and heal and then go home every night, like what I did before I became a genin. You'll be living at headquarters. You might get to go home once or twice a month, depending on how well you do in training and the demand for you as a medic. I don't want to do this. I'd rather take another mission to the lines and healing there without discrimination. Noted. But it doesn't change anything, does it? It does not. I might have been able to pull that off, but I have Kakashi to care for and I can't cover your ass in the field at the same time. I will do right by my son. I slumped back into the bench. I know the Hokage isn't trying to screw me over, but I'm finding it extremely difficult not to hate him. I'm aware, Kichiro, but this is for the best. Let's take you home and I'll pick you up after breakfast tomorrow. There's nothing either of us can do about it now. When I shrugged my response, Sakumo wrapped his hand around my arm and pulled me into a shunshin. We landed on the back porch of the Uzumaki clan house. From what I could tell, it was just after lunchtime. Apparently, I had lost more time than I thought. As Sakumo and I entered through the back, we waited to watch as Takashi escorted the civilian kids out of the front door, each of them holding tightly to the collars of their dogs. Hurry up! You'll all be late for your classes. Go on! Jin, it's your responsibility to make sure Akashi and Misaki get to their classroom. Why can't Minato-chan or Kushina-chan do it since they're still here? The oldest boy whined and suddenly pointed at me. Kairo and I is here too. Why can't he? Kichiro-kun hasn't had a chance to eat his lunch and both Minato and Kushina are behind in their Fuinjutsu lessons. Takashi didn't even miss a beat. Why can't you? The boy continued to complain. Because I have to clean up your mess. Now stop complaining or I'll actually make you do your homework tonight. All of you, scat. Takashi managed to herd them all out the door and shut it smartly behind him. He looked more than a little frustrated as he strode towards us. Hatake-san, I need to talk to you. Kichiro-kun, ISE is going to be home in the next hour and it's your head on the chopping block if he catches you looking like death warmed over when you just made it out of the hospital to begin with. Go clean up, the shower in the corner of the third floor is finally working. Your old clothes are probably too small, but if Kushina hasn't gotten you new ones, Minato's will fit you just fine. Now scat. I rolled my eyes at him before heading towards the staircase and dragging myself up. I didn't look that bad, just a bit of dirt and dust in my clothes and a residual bruise. I waved to Kushina on the second floor when she looked up to see me. Minato didn't look up from whatever seal he was working on. Fuso sat beside Nagato at a separate desk facing away from the stairs, and since Kushina didn't say anything before she leaned back over a section of Minato's project, they never knew I was there as I continued to drag myself up. The surprisingly hot water eased the stiffness in my muscles, and the water woke me up, though I was still hungry. I took my time in the shower. A few minutes in, I heard someone knock on the bathroom door. "Who is it?" I called out. The door opened a little bit. "It's Kushina. I just got some of Minato's clothes so you don't have to put your uniform back on," she said through the crack. "Thank you. You can just leave it outside." The door opened and closed. I assumed she had left and picked up the bar of soap to finish washing my hair. "Can I ask you something, Nissan?" she asked, her voice on the other side of the curtain. I jumped and dropped the soap in surprise, swearing. Of course, it had to land on my toe. "Shit! Kushina, I'm in the shower." So? People don't wear clothing in the shower. Minato doesn't mind when I bother him during his showers. Besides, I've seen you naked plenty of times before. I spluttered at that before hurrying to rinse my hair and grab the towel on the hook outside the curtain to wrap around my waist, before exiting the shower somewhat decent. I wasn't self-conscious or anything, but she was a 10-year-old little girl. I put my hands on her shoulders and steered her out the door. "We are going to have a long talk after I get dressed. Thank you for the clothes." I shut the door behind her and quickly pulled on said clothing before opening the door again, while drying my hair with the towel. "Now I can help you. What do you need?" That's the end of this tale for now. Like, comment, subscribe and all that jazz. And with that being said, peace.